Are you ready, Ms. Norman?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Mr. Chairman, the next witness is also from the SABC, and his name is Mr. Mwaba Piri. I had asked the registrar to open up Exhibit CC16 before you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. We will also make reference to Exhibit 25, which is Mr. Matthews's statement.
Okay.
Thank you. May the witness be sworn in?
Yes, please administer the oath or affirmation.
Please state your full names for the record.
Mwaba Piri.
Do you have any objection with making the prescribed affirmation?
I have no objection.
Do you solemnly affirm that the evidence you will give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, please raise your right hand and say, I truly affirm.
I truly affirm.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, you may.
Yes, you may
proceed.
Thank you. Mr. Piri, you have in front of you a lever arch file, and I had asked that you have a look at a divider marked CC16, which contains what appears to be your statement. Is that correct?
That's true.
Yes, thank you. If you go to that page 1 of that document, it has your names, your full names there, and then I would like you to have a look at page 6.
Page 6.
Is that your signature?
That's my signature.
Thank you. And then if you go to page 7, did you depose to that affidavit at Brixton on the 21st of August 2019?
Yes, I did.
Yes, thank you. And are the contents of your statement true and correct?
They are true and correct.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Piri, is it correct that you're employed by the SABC?
It's correct.
In what position are you employed?
I'm an executive producer in the current affairs department.
Yes. For how long have you been with the SABC?
The SABC recruited me from Lusaka in 1996.
Yes.
My maths is very bad. That should be 25 years.
Yes.
Yes.
Could you just briefly place your qualifications on record?
Okay.
Yes.
I hold a postgraduate diploma in business management from Milpark Business School. Or am I going about it the wrong way? I should start from my matric.
No, Mr. Piri, you can start from anywhere because, you know, sometimes maybe if you start in a certain way, people think you belong to a certain age group. So start where you want to start.
Thank you, Chair. And I also hold a Bachelor of Mass Communications honors degree from the University of Zambia, obtained in 1989. I matriculated in Zambia at Mufulira Secondary School.
Yes.
In 1975.
Yes. Thank you.
That's all.
And now, in terms of your career, you told the chairperson that then you were recruited in 1996. Before that, if you were in Zambia, what positions were you holding there?
I worked in various organizations. I worked with Zambia Information Services, Zambia News Agency, and Zambia National Broadcasting Corporation.
Yes, thank you. Did you then, when you were recruited to South Africa, did you, to the SABC rather, did you progress through the ranks, or were you recruited just to hold positions in the executive or management positions?
No, I went through the ranks. I was initially recruited because the SABC was on a very big program to venture into the continent. So Channel Africa radio station is the one that brought me to Johannesburg. But then as I was here, the SABC started the first 24-hour news channel. It was called SABC Africa. And then I was moved from the radio to television. From 1998 up to now, I've been rising, I might say what you call rising through the ranks.
Yes.
Happened to me. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. And then in paragraph 3 of your statement at page 1.
Paragraph 3.
Page 1.
Yes, Chair, I've got it.
Yes, you state there that you were approached by the investigators of the commission, hence you deposed to this affidavit. So, the question time program that you deal with in paragraph 5 at page 2 of your statement, as to what was this program about and how long did it last and how did it end?
Question Time was a program designed to interrogate newsmakers of various, what should I say, professions?
Different sectors.
Different sectors.
Yeah.
It was providing an in-depth kind of feel about what's making news. Like right now, the violence is making news. We would have probably brought in the Home Affairs Minister or various NGOs.
Yes.
It was that kind of program.
Yes.
It started just initially with the start of the SABC news channel in 2012. So we were on air from 2012 up to 2018.
And then how did you halt that program?
Sorry, I didn't get your question.
How did you put an end to the program, or why?
I never put an end to that program. The program was halted in very, very controversial circumstances. During the reign of Mr. Claudi Musweneng, the program was quite controversial in that we brought people that were not friends of, for lack of a better word, yes, not friends, people whom management was not happy about to our platforms. And this annoyed most of our managers. So much so that we used to, we ended up coming in and fulfilling our mandate rather secretly.
Yes.
Like the instances I have put in my affidavit where we had to smuggle in Mrs. Madonsela, Mrs. Tuli Madonsela, after she had released the report on the SABC.
Yes. Now we're going to talk about that just now, but I would like you to tell the chairperson as to how were you told that this program is going to come to an end and what the reasons were for putting it, for halting that program?
I was told in 2018 by Mrs. Maseko, Mrs. Notando Maseko, that the program would not continue. Then I proceeded to request reasons behind that. She didn't have any reasons, so in upward
I'm sorry, did you say she didn't give you reasons?
She didn't give me reasons.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, because of upward referral, I decided to take it to the acting, at that moment it was the acting CEO. She called for, sorry, she didn't call for a meeting. I can't remember what happened. I think we...
Did you say acting COO or acting CEO?
Acting CEO.
CEO.
Yes.
Okay, in 2018.
Yes, Chair.
And who was the acting CEO at the time?
It was Mrs. Sorry, I forget her second name, Nomsa.
Oh, you forget the surname?
The second name, I forget it.
Okay, no, that's fine. I'm sure we will find out.
Yes.
Yes, okay, you may continue.
Yeah, at the meeting we held, at which we discussed this issue, she thought it needed to be resolved between me and the COO. The COO. The COO then was Mr. Maruleng, Chris Maruleng.
Chris Maluleka. Okay.
Yes, Chair. Her directive was never enforced. He never came back
And interview them.
and interviewed them.
Yeah. If it was something that needed Home Affairs, you might bring the Minister of Home Affairs. If it was something relating to energy, you might bring in the Minister of Energy, and maybe you might bring in an expert on energy, that kind of thing. That's what it was dealing with.
Precisely.
And then you'd ask questions, and there would be answers, and so on.
Exactly,
That's what it was like.
That's what it was.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. What was the frequency of this program, question time?
It was a daily program, from Monday to Friday initially, sorry, Monday to Saturday initially, then we changed it some 2 years into the operations of SABC News into a 4-day program.
Yes. And what time during the day?
What I would call 17:30 is what time now? 5:30 p.m.
5 p.m. So you walk into your work establishment one day and you are told that it's not gonna, your program has come to an end.
I was given some 30 days notice.
So, or there would be some notice.
Yes, Ms. Maseko sent me a memo which said from next month this program won't be on air.
Yes.
Well, before you proceed, you said that you were bringing into the program people that the management did not like.
Which news management didn't like.
Why did you bring only people that the management did not like?
Maybe I made a sweeping statement. It's not always that everybody that we brought in wasn't liked. But we had the audacity, for lack of a better word, to bring in even the people that management didn't want, because we felt they were driving the news.
Yes.
Yes, but were you bringing in a mix of people, so there were some that management liked or should have liked, and there were some that they didn't like and maybe should not have not liked?
Definitely so, Chair.
Okay, all right.
Thank you, Chair. The name of the person that you forgot, is, just to remind you, is that Ms. Nomsa Piliso?
Piliso, yes.
Is that correct? Yes. Thank you. Could you then tell the chairperson about the incident, then in your drive then to bring the people onto your program? You have mentioned that after the release by the public protector of her report, when governance and ethics failed in 2014, February 2014. So you say you decided that you were going to bring her to your show?
Yes,
or invite her to your show?
Yes, Chair. At our daily editorial meeting, we decided, my team decided we needed to have Mrs. Madonsela, even if she was giving a report that was quite negative for the SABC.
Yes.
Is this now between the date when you received the notice to say your program will come to an end in 30 days?
No, this is actually before.
Oh, this is before,
This is
okay.
This is in 2014.
Oh, okay. Okay. Mr. Newman, I think he had not finished saying what
answer.
happened, but it may be that you might wish to finish everything that happened before.
Yes,
Yeah,
Michelle.
yes.
Or before the termination?
Yes, because
Yes.
there was the question of the process not being taken forward, in terms of which he and the COO were supposed to talk
meet,
further.
yes,
to
and
meet
deal
so
with it.
on.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Maybe we could finish that so that I don't forget.
Yes.
Thank you. You say then the CEO had given sort of a direction that you had to meet.
Mr. Maruleng had to meet me
Yes,
to
Mr.
resolve
Maruleng,
this issue.
you had to meet and resolve the issue, but that never happened.
That never happened. Up
So-
to today, it hasn't happened.
So I would imagine then when Mr. Maruleng was not getting back to you, you would have gone back to the CEO and say, CEO, nothing is happening. What's happening with my program?
I indeed went back to the acting CEO. I still didn't receive any response.
Yes.
She didn't give you any response?
I wasn't given any response.
Oh, but did you speak to her? Did she just stand there and not say anything, or did you just send something in writing?
I communicated in writing.
In writing, oh, okay.
Yes, Chair.
And you didn't get any response?
I didn't get any response.
So then, during that 30-day period of notice that was given to you, then as a person who was producing this program, I would imagine that would be the time for you to be telling your listeners and your viewers that this is going to come to an end. Is that what you did during that period?
I must admit I was defiant, and I thought announcing to my audience that we are going off air would be agreeing to the wrong decision that the program should go off air. I hadn't agreed. If they were going to give me a rationale of some kind, I would probably have gone and told my audience that yes, the program is coming to an end. But they didn't come back to me.
Yes.
I'm sorry, but actually, as I understand the position from what you have said, although you had been given notice that a decision had been taken that the program would come to an end in 30 days' time or so.
Yes, Chair.
There had been subsequent developments, namely your meeting with the acting CEO, and in terms of that meeting, the process was still going to go forward. You and the COO were still going to meet.
Very true, Chair.
And I would imagine that it would be reasonable to think that until that process had been taken forward, you couldn't take that notice to remain valid.
Very true. Very true.
Because you didn't know what would be the outcome of your further consult meetings with the COO.
That's true, Chair.
It could result in you agreeing that the program should come to an end, or you could persuade the COO that there is value in the program continuing.
Program going ahead. That's true, Chair.
Okay.
Thank you. How was the popularity of this program?
This was one of the most popular programs on the channel. The marketing department for the SABC would probably give you the data, the evidence that they were often giving all of us. They said it was the best performing program in the afternoon section of the broadcast. So on one day when this marketing professional was giving us this talk, he was puzzled at the fact that it had been pulled off air.
From what time to what time did you used to have the program?
From 5:30 in the afternoon to 6 o'clock.
Okay. So it was 30 minutes.
30 minutes.
But very popular.
But very, very popular.
Okay.
And according to paragraph 5 of your statement, it lasted for almost 6 years.
Yes, Chair.
Yes. Thank you. Then let's go back then to the question that, the matter that we were dealing with then.
But did it end or did it not end when the 30 days was up? Let's complete that.
Yes, it ended. It was just pulled off air, I would say.
Without any further discussion?
Without any further discussion. So much so that I was forced to take the issue to the Joe Tlolo Commission, Editorial Commission.
Yes.
It features in that report, but even then I'm still awaiting some kind of action.
Yes. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And then let's talk about then the report comes out when governance and ethics fail, and you decide that you would want to invite Mrs. Madonsela to your show. Yes. Take us through that process. What did you do, and then what happened?
Yeah, there was a very, very stifling atmosphere at the SABC then. We had.
And this was which year now?
2014.
2014.
Yes.
Okay.
2014. So much so that even the inviting of Mrs. Madonsela was done discreetly. We didn't want the top management to be aware of whom we were bringing in. But even then, we still knew that we could, I forget one thing. At the time, the program was a pre-recorded program, meaning we would record in the morning and then put it on air later. So when we invited Mrs. Madonsela, we had to make sure that between the time of recording and the time of airing, nobody interfered with whatever product we had. So we went about this by doing everything very, very secretly. We invite her, she comes. Sorry, again, I forgot something. We had a strategy in which we first of all informed our colleagues in inverted commas, in the news media, in the print media, that we were going to have Mrs. Madonsela on our program. We were going to record her at a certain time. This ensured that they would bring in a camera person of some kind who would record the fact that we had talked to Mrs. Madonsela. If she doesn't go on air, they would still have a story.
Proof.
Yes. Yes. So that's what happened.
Yes.
We recorded Mrs. Madonsela, but we hid the tape. That the tape is called the FX tape. That's the final tape that we have supposed to take to FCC. FCC is supposed to be the final control center. These are the people who receive a product and then put it on air for the rest of the public to view. We hid that tape from everybody. We wanted to hand it in only at about 5 o'clock, 30 minutes before going on air. And I think that plan worked quite well, because if there was anybody looking for it, they couldn't have seen the tape anywhere.
But then before you move on, how would you hide her with it coming into the studio? How did you manage that?
Okay. What we did in this case is the team gave the tape to me to keep. Yes. So I was holding on to the tape, and this is a bit embarrassing. I ran away from the office. I had to run away because I was anticipating queries.
Yes.
Yeah.
But where is this tape? So I had to run away until 5 o'clock. That's when I came back.
Yes.
And then handed it over to FCC.
Mm. But I think she was asking us before that. What you have said is important.
Yes.
But I think she was asking how you managed to hide Miss Madonsela herself when she came to the SABC.
Oh, I see. No, I wouldn't actually put it in those words. We didn't hide her as such. She had come. She had come earlier for a program called News at 8.
Yes.
It's a radio program.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, she didn't go on air. I don't know what happened there. I'm on the TV side.
Yes.
But we heard rumors that her show, which was supposed to have been done earlier, had been cancelled. So now my team was getting very tense. If her earlier radio shows were being cancelled, what would happen to us? And indeed, even before that, again, one of my team members came and told me she's supposed to be on Morning Live, but she has been cancelled again. We nevertheless decided we just had to go ahead with whatever we are doing. We knew we were going to be in big problems, but we decided let's just go ahead.
So the day when she was going to have this interview with you, and which was going to be recorded, happened to be the day when she was going to be at SABC anyway for other programs.
For other programs, yes.
Okay.
Yes, thank you. And the date is what you have in paragraph 9, being the 18th of Tuesday, 18th Feb 2014.
18th February, yes, if I recall, yes.
That's the date.
That was the date.
All right. And then, so maybe I should just take you to, then you'll tell me if you think that the reference to this article is premature, but I think it relates to some of her invitations that were now declined, in the sense that they were not going on. If you could turn to page 9 of your statement, you will see there's 2 pages, page 8 and then there's page 9.
Page 9, Tuli
Yes.
in dark.
Yes. What does it say?
Tuli in dark over cancelled interview.
Yes. And when you said some of your interviews were cancelled, are you relating to this?
To this interview.
To these interviews?
Yeah, this is the radio interview.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah,
and
and I'm sure if you can see that there's a picture of Tuli and Paul Sedu, my presenter.
yes,
He was the presenter of this program.
yes.
They
And
are
then,
coming, emerging from the SABC.
thank you. And then if you go to that page, page 9, let's just deal with that, and then we know when we move on, we won't have to come back to it. If you go back to page 9, you will see the date there is the Sowetan article, date 19 Feb 2014, and then it says the last-minute cancellation of a scheduled SABC radio interview with public protector Thuli Madonsela yesterday is shrouded in mystery.
Yes.
So this is what you're talking about.
Yes, Chair, that's what I
Yes.
was talking about.
Then, did you get to know why this show was cancelled, even if it was just after you had now recorded her?
Not formally. All I knew was that because of the fact that she had a report that was negative about our COO, definitely she wouldn't be welcome.
Yes. And
But I think the SABC did issue their own reasoning behind. They claimed something of the sort that she wasn't invited properly. I'm not on record.
yes, all right. But there's some reason well, this is, I think this, the spokeswoman for the public protector, we were not aware that the interview was cancelled until we got here, said Madonsela's spokeswoman, Khalele Masibi, outside the studios. We were not given a reason why it was cancelled.
That's true.
That's what's contained in that, yes.
That's true, Chair.
Yes, thank you. And then she said, then they just gave us an apology, and that was it. Yeah.
That's true, Chair.
Thank you. So going back then to your recording, so then you say you ran away, and then your program is going to air at 5 o'clock. So you came back at 5 o'clock?
I came back at 5 o'clock.
Yes, and you played. Then it went on air.
Yeah, then it went on air.
Okay. And then what were the consequences of you having done that? What happened?
My line manager, Mr. Temba Mtembu, called me and he asked for the professional reasons behind me bringing in Mrs. Madonsela. I explained exactly that she is the kind of person this program had been made for. She's making news at the moment, and people want to find out more about whatever reports she has given. Mr. Mtembu was, to me, looked quite understanding. He said, it's all right, but unfortunately I have to go and explain this at some meeting. That's what he told me.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
If you wanted to invite somebody to come and participate in your program or to be recorded for your program, were you required to notify anybody beforehand that this is the person you are inviting for that day, and they were supposed to approve or not approve? Or were you free to invite whoever you thought would be good for your program?
According to SABC editorial policy, I am not supposed to, but we do have a diary meeting at which what we call an idea is handed over, and you explain to the meeting who you are going to invite.
And it is at that meeting that other people might get to know what your plans are in terms of inviting anybody.
Yes, it's at that meeting.
And they can express their views if they want to, but normally you decide.
Normally, yeah, because the manager of the product or the program decides.
Okay.
They could give you advice which might make you think twice,
Yes.
and you may decide not to go ahead.
But it's nothing more than advice.
Nothing more than advice.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So that was the first incident that you had mentioned, and then the second incident, you deal with it in paragraph 14, and you entitled that paragraph by saying changes to editorial policy 2014 elections. Could you then tell the chairperson what is that incident all about?
This incident involved Mr. Julius Malema, the leader of the Economic Freedom Front. He had just released his
Economic Freedom Fighters.
Economic Freedom Fighters.
Oh, okay.
It's a political party.
No, I thought you said front. Okay. Maybe I missed it.
Is it Economic Freedom Front? Or?
No, twice you said fighters.
Fighters.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mr. Malema had just released his party's election list on March 17th. My team, again, felt that he was the right person to bring to our program. But like I've said, the atmosphere in the SABC, this is a month later after Mrs. Madonsela's case. Bringing him in was going to be very difficult. Indeed, when he came in, unfortunately, by some coincidence, he was coming in as our GE News was going out for the workshop that my colleague Krivani was earlier talking about. So they were going to some hotel in East Rand to discuss election coverage.
And who is the GE News? The name of the
Mr.
GE
Jimmy
News?
Matthews.
Mr. Jimmy Matthews, yes.
Mr. Jimmy Matthews.
Yes.
I hear that, I don't know what happened, but I hear that immediately he saw Malema going in. He looked for somebody to follow him and go and stop whatever he was doing. So this happened to be Mr. Kwezi Sikosana, my colleague. He was also an executive producer. Mr. Sikosana went after Mr. Malema to go and stop whatever interview he was doing. But before that, another colleague called Vincent Mfundisi came to my office and tipped me off and said, your program is about to be stopped. Go to the studio right now. So I ran to the studio, and indeed I found Mr. Sikosana busy telling my team to stop, to halt the recordings. I told Mr. Sikosana I wouldn't, my reporting line had nothing to do with it. But nevertheless, he insisted that I shouldn't have a quarrel with him. It's not him to blame. He was only passing on a message from Mr. Matthews. I retorted that his message had been received, but we were going ahead with our recording, and asked him to leave the studio. We continued with the recording, and we concluded with it eventually. But given these happenings, we knew we would be in big problems. So we decided rather spontaneously no, it wasn't spontaneously this. We decided to have two tapes, two final tapes. And then one we hid, that I was holding on to it. The other one, my team was holding, because we were now anticipating either Mr. Matthews or anyone to come and request for that tape. Before we could go on air, I can't remember precisely the order of events, but Mr. Tebele approached my team and asked for the tape.
As you suspected would happen.
As I suspected it would happen, Chair. Mr. Tebele, unfortunately, was from a different unit altogether. He was heading what we call the Special Projects Department. So I wondered why he had to ask for my tape. Nevertheless, by the time I was thinking about that, Mr. Tebele had already been handed the tape. I wouldn't have handed it to if he had come to me.
Yes.
But he had gone behind me and talked to my juniors and asked for the tape. So they gave him the tape. There was also some controversy over this. I remember Mr. Malema and his party thought that pre-recording they had done on that particular day would go on air later in that day, but it wasn't supposed to be that way. It was supposed to be the following day. So when they didn't see their show on air, they concluded the SABC
had cancelled it.
Had cancelled it, yes. But it hadn't been cancelled yet. I was holding on to the tape, like I said.
But the tape you were holding on to was the second one, or the
second
alternative
one? Yes, but it was the same thing.
Yes, so, but yeah. Those who took the other one may have thought that there would be it would not be shown because they were having the tape. They didn't know about the second tape, did they?
No, apparently what happened, Chair, was this. Mr. Tebele viewed the tape and came back to me and told them he was of the opinion it was all right.
Yes.
It could go on air, but he never came back again to come and tell us if we should go on air or not. And I didn't wait for him.
Okay, but he brought back the tape.
He brought back the tape to my team the next day.
Yes. But and in any event, from what you're telling us, he had no business telling you whether to air or not that program, from what you had said. Now, so...
I'm sorry, you were saying that Mr. Malema or the EFF, when they didn't see the interview being shown on that evening, they thought the program or that interview had been cancelled. I think you were about to say something about whether there is anything they did about
Yes, Chair. They went to the media and spread the story that SABC had cancelled their interview.
Yes.
I think that was the story that was trending in those 2 days.
Yes.
I was sort of not very concerned about that because I knew it would go on air in the evening, late on the next day.
Okay.
So when it went on air...
That really, that's the reason why you felt that, look, you needed to bring these incidents to the attention of the Commission. But what I want to understand is what do you conclude, or what did you conclude at the time as to what was happening within the SABC, and why would you regard these as changes within the editorial policy, as you've headed one of the paragraphs?
It wasn't very difficult to conclude, although we may be accused of speculating more than necessary. But our COO at the time had just been, I think, confirmed in that position. Now, if you monitored the trajectory of our COO from, I think, producer level up to COO position, it was some kind of amazing thing. How a producer would go and become a COO. Apart from that, given Thuli Madonsela's report, I don't know if you're familiar with it. Mrs. Madonsela had stated that our COO had no matric, and then she wondered what he was doing in the SABC. Given all those kinds of happenings around at that time, you were bound to believe that this gentleman had ties with very, very high offices in the land. How else did he manage to go up in such a very, very, what can I say, for lack of a better word, such a lightning manner? At the same time...
Is that Very quickly.
Very quickly, yes.
Yeah, okay.
At the same time as he goes into that COO's office,
He did it like a lightning.
like lightning, yeah.
Yes.
As he arrives in the office of the COO, the Minister of Communication decides to change the job responsibilities or descriptions of the COO position so that he now has control over the newsroom. All along, the COO in the SABC had nothing to do with the newsroom. But suddenly he is a person who goes controversially into that position and becomes head of the newsroom. That left many of the people, many of my colleagues, to think he has very, very strong relations with someone high in the political leadership. So that became very stifling in the newsroom. You didn't need to be on his wrong side.
Now, you spoke about somebody moving from being producer to COO. Are you talking about Mr. Mutsoneng when you say that?
I was talking about Mr. Mutsoneng.
Yes. Did he move from producer level to COO?
Yes, Chair.
Yes. And how many levels are there from COO to from producer to COO, more or less?
There should be about six, yes. Producer, bulletin editor, executive producer. Yeah, there should be about 6.
So normally, to get to COO, one could be expected, if you go through the ranks, as you were saying earlier on, to go at least through most of them.
Through most of those
yes.
ranks.
Okay.
Yes, Chair.
Thank you. Could you just read out what you say to the chairperson in paragraph 15 of your affidavit, please?
On paragraph 15?
Yes, 15, that's at page 4.
The newsroom was at the time abuzz with Mr. Musweneng's close ties with President Jacob Zuma, and inviting a person like Mr. Malema was going to be seen as an affront to our boss's reputed relation with President Zuma.
Did you share these views?
Yes, I did.
Yes. Then those are the only incidents that you wanted to highlight in your evidence, am I correct?
Yes, these are the only ones. I think I raised some other incidents which you are aware of when the SABC 8 was asking for a review.
Yes.
My affidavits are there.
Oh, you mean in Mr. Tole's?
In the Constitutional Court. No.
No, those applications, yes.
Yes.
All right, okay. No, yeah, but then can I just take you through to what Mr. Matthews says in response to what you say about him?
Yes, Chair.
Mr. Matthews,
maybe before that, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Mr. Piri, it's very strange, it seems to me, that the newsroom had at some stage this type of situation that you have described, particularly the newsroom of a public broadcaster, where you have to, I don't know if you used the word, maybe you didn't use the word sneak in, but, bring in people that you think have something to contribute for the listeners or for the public. You have to bring them in secretly, and you have to record. When you record them, you fear that somebody from high up is going to come and demand the tape, and you'll never be able to have it on air. To the extent that you had to resort to absenting yourself from the building for I assume a number of hours, and come back at 5 o'clock just to make sure that the tape would not be taken away from you, and that the public would be able to view and watch the interview. just seems a very strange environment that for any journalist in South Africa in 2014 with our constitution and the kind of democracy that we have. It's just, I mean, as you were telling me, it was like, can that really be South Africa? Could that kind of thing happen?
Yes, Chair. Those things, I would probably say even worse things happen. If I have to somehow refer to the other affidavits I had submitted with the SABC 8. There were times when somebody would be on air, and then you get a call that halt that program, stop that program immediately. So you have to go there and defend yourself as the program is on air.
Well, I'm sure there will be those incidents will be told to me in due course as well. But you did say they are covered in an affidavit that you had prepared. It's important that one gets the full picture of what happened, because one doesn't want a situation where you think we have got the full picture and somebody else comes and says, no, that's not the full picture. Actually, what Mr. Phiri was telling you was just an exception. I can give you a full picture, and when you have the full picture, you will see that things were not as he described them.
Yes.
But also, we don't want a situation where we might think it's an isolated incident that you have told me about. If it was not an isolated incident, if there were many more, it's important that one gets the full picture.
Yes, Chair.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. May I just, Chair, direct your attention to Exhibit CC25, which is the affidavit of Mr. Matthews. Mr. Phiri, you have it there next to you. If you could please turn to page 2 of that.
Page 2?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. After Mr. Matthews was sent a 3-3 notice, he responded, and this is his response to paragraphs 17 and 18 of your affidavit. And he even quotes those, he started quoting from paragraph 16, and he deals with the incident that you testified to relating to Mr. Malema. And his response to that, he says, I beg your pardon, I've been requested by officials of the Commission of Inquiry into allegations of state capture, fraud, and corruption in the public sector, including organs of state, to respond to the statement of Mr. Mwaba Phiri, dated 15 August 2019, particularly paragraphs 17 and 18 thereof, which I have been advised implicate or may implicate me in relation to matters that are being investigated by the Commission. In order to respond to paragraphs 17 and 18, it is necessary to quote those paragraphs as well as paragraph 16 of Mr. Phiri's statement, which records the following. And then he goes and he quotes what you've already testified to about Mr. Malema's recording, interview, rather. And then in paragraph 6, then he says, I respond to Mr. Phiri's contentions as follows. It is clear from the contents of these paragraphs that Mr. Phiri does not have any personal knowledge of the allegations that he makes against me, and they accordingly constitute hearsay evidence and should be disregarded. In any event, 6.2, in any event, I have no recollection of any involvement in this matter and accordingly deny its contents. Do you have any remarks to that, any response?
I would just probably say I accordingly assert the truth of these contents as far as I'm concerned.
Yes. Thank you.
But you say you were saying what somebody else told you, namely that he had been asked by Mr. Matthews to come to the newsroom and
The
stop
recording
program.
studio,
Yes.
Chair.
Yeah. So what you were saying is what that person said. named insofar as he mentioned Mr.
Matthews.
Jimmy Matthews' name.
Yes,
Yes,
Chair.
yes. It is that person who would know whether it's true or not, but that's what the person said.
That's what the person said, that's
Yes,
true.
yes.
And he told my team
Yes,
to stop the recording.
yes. So the part that's what you had being told to your team from that person, that remains.
That
What you
remains.
don't know
Oh, I
is
don't-
whether he was telling the truth in saying Mr. Matthews had sent him.
That's true.
That's what you don't know.
That's true, yeah.
Thank you. And then lastly, Mr. Phiri, then the current environment that you are in now, the newsroom, and how matters are being handled now, is it different from how it was in 2014, or has it improved? And could you just tell the chair if it has, to what extent?
It has definitely improved. I'll give a very biased answer because I am affected. My program is not on air. That's why I can't say it's excellent. It has improved.
Yes.
But my program went off air because I suspect of the residues of the Mutlaung era who are still trying to have their way at the SABC.
When you say your program is not on air, are you referring to
Question time.
to question time?
Yes, Chair.
You wish it to be restored, to come back?
Yes, Chair, I've been fighting for that up to today.
Yes, okay, okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That is all from this witness.
That's
Thank
all.
you.
You were there at the SABC for all the time that Mr. Msoneng was COO or acting COO, is that right?
Yes, Chair.
Did you have many dealings with him directly yourself?
Not directly, except for times when I would probably invite him to my program.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and he would
Okay.
come in.
Okay. I was just I was wondering whether you might be able to explain or give us a picture of why it is that it looks like he was very influential within SABC. Earlier on, I had evidence, and Mr. Jim Matthews, in his response to the statements of other witnesses, has said that Mr. Msoneng was the kind of person that it was difficult to disagree with or have a fight with or express different views from his. And I was thinking you might be able to give me a picture as to whether that was your feeling as well, that was your view, and what the basis was for even somebody as senior as Mr. Jimmy Matthews not feeling that he could stand up and say, no, I don't agree with you, to Mr. Msoneng. That's something you are unable to do, to give a picture that might explain that.
Influential is, I think, Chair, what you as a judge would politely want to put it.
Yeah.
As far as the newsroom was concerned, he was authoritarian. He was a dictator. Whatever he wanted, whatever he woke up with must be done. I gave the example, not in this forum, somewhere else, of the fact that the 90% South African music directorate wasn't in any way bad, but just the way it was done. Yeah, there was no strategy. Somebody just wakes up one day and just tells all of you 90%. There are quotas, there are local music quotas nearly everywhere around the globe. You will find the French have got something like, I think it's 99%. music must be in their language.
Must be, yes.
Yes. So there was probably nothing wrong with the SABC going to 90%, but the way it was done was not proper. He antagonized stakeholders within and outside. Business who could have been partners in that 90% felt they had to hit back by withdrawing their business. And that's what made it fail, because there is no
consultation.
No consultation.
Okay, okay. No, thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Piri. Thank
Sorry,
you.
Chair.
Yes.
I also wanted to put this on. I thought this commission needs to look out for the fact that state broadcasters around the continent are they are the norm on the continent. As a result, even our political leadership here wants to replicate those. Fortunately for South Africa, it has a constitution that is very, very, very so ideal that I think it goes into the clouds instead of interacting with the people. It's too good.
Too good.
Yeah. And I don't think it's appreciated on the ground. The media, us, the news media, need to play our role there. I think we are very integral to the constitutional requirement of the fact that for the judiciary, the legislature, and parliaments to check each other, they must have freedom of expression. They can't do that without freedom of expression.
Yes.
So if the public broadcaster is captured, that kind of check won't take place. We need to have a public broadcaster more than any other broadcaster. Let's forget about the private media. The public broadcaster whose stakeholdership includes the whole country needs to be protected from any form of capture, from either the state,
or
political, or even ideological capture. So I would have thought, I would like to be very stern about our plea that something should happen after this commission to protect the SABC so well that whatever happened in the last 5 years should never ever occur again.
Yes, yes. No, I mean, the media is crucial in any democracy. I mean, the matters that this commission is investigating, a lot of them came to the fore because of the media, because of journalists, courageous journalists who investigated certain things and put them forward. Then the public began to realize that there were certain things that needed further investigation. So the role of the media is really crucial. But as you may have heard when I spoke to Ms. Pillay, journalists all over are invited to reflect on what kind of recommendations this commission should consider making at the end of its work that would achieve what you are talking about. So I will be very interested at the right time to receive input from the media people themselves and take them into account in making recommendations that I would make. So all of you can start working.
We will definitely respond.
Yes, yes, yes. No, thank you very much. Thank you for coming to share your evidence with the commission. If we need to ask you to come back, we may ask you, but for now you are excused.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, the next witness is the witness, Ms. Thandeka Qubule Mbeki.
Yes.
Her statement is in Exhibit CC 29.
Okay.
Ms. Chairman, whilst the witness is proceeding to take his seat, may I just explain to the chair that this witness was moved. She was supposed to testify sometime next week. But because one witness that was scheduled for today could not make it today due to an official engagement,
Yes.
we moved her to today, but all the implicated persons were notified telephonically, and
Yes.
they had all indicated that they had no difficulty with her testifying.
Okay,
today.
okay.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, no, that's fine.
Thank you. Chair, there's a few errors in the statement of the witness. Her name is not spelled correctly. In fact, I think the team that
What's happening? I've been talking about people's names not
Yes.
being spelled correctly.
Thank you. But what is interesting here, Chair, I think the mistake was made by the witness herself. Because if Chair were to go to page 28, where she is signed, her surname, the first surname is spelled incorrectly. And I think then the team that was binding went, in fact, even on the first page, Chair, you'll find that what's on page 28 and what's on the first page is also different. So the team just went with what is contained on the first page. Yes. Yes, no, it is worse.
You know,
Yes.
GC instead of GQ.
Yes, and then in 28 there's QC, and then the witness signed. I think it must have been maybe a computer glitch there. I don't know. Thank you. But
you will make arrangements
they'll-
for these pages to be replaced by pages that have got
with the
correct
correct names.
spelling.
Yes, Chair. Thank you.
So
Thank you.
on.
Thank you.
No.
And then, Chair, you'll find also with this affidavit of the witness herself had decided, instead of attaching annexures, to actually incorporate what's contained in the annexures in the affidavit itself. So the numbering is a bit different.
Yes.
But she's quite comfortable. I'm quite comfortable leading her on her statement. We'll
Yes,
be
no,
able to
that's
navigate
fine.
it. Yes.
That's the norm, isn't it? Outside of the commission. That's
Some
what
people like to do
annexures,
that.
just attach them
Yes.
without these dividers
yeah.
that you people like.
No, that is true, Chair. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Chair. May
May
she be
say,
sworn
let's
in?
admit this,
as Exhibit CC
the
29.
file containing the statement of Ms. Thandeka Kumulembeki will be marked as Exhibit CC 29.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
May the witness be sworn in?
Yes, you
Thank you.
can administer the oath or affirmation.
Please state your full name for the record.
My name is Thandeka Kubulembeki.
Do you have any objection to taking the prescribed oath?
No,
Do you consider the oath to be binding on your conscience?
I consider the oath binding on my conscience.
Do you swear that the evidence you will give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If
I-
so, please raise your right hand and say, "So help me God."
So help me God.
Thank you very much, Ms. Kubulembeki. Thank you.
Thank you.
You may
Thank you, Mr.
proceed.
Chairman. Thank you. Ms. Kolule Mbeki, can you please look at the document that is in front of you? Is that your statement? In fact, it is an affidavit, but it's written statement at page 1. Is that correct?
Yes, it is, Chair.
Yes, thank you. And if you turn to page 28 of that document,
Yes,
yes, is that your signature that appears there?
indeed it is.
Thank you. And then is it correct that your first surname is not spelled correctly there? Could you correct it for the record?
It should be Gubule, which is G-Q-U-B-U-L-E.
Yes, thank you. And that is the same at page, if you go to page 1, it also is misspelled there, is that correct?
Yes, may I clarify that on the hop I we had worked on this document for quite a while, so I mainly addressed myself to the contents rather than
Yes.
the aesthetics and the spelling, which I apologize for.
No, yes, thank you. No, we'll do, you will have to do a supplementary affidavit, but after you've testified today, to
Indeed.
correct those errors.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And did you make this statement freely and voluntarily?
I did so.
Yes, and the contents of your of this affidavit true and correct?
They are.
Yes, thank you. Could you just tell the chairperson?
Well, I see the one is a statement. I think the others may be a affidavit.
The others that are incorporated are various
But I
court
s-
applications.
I see that it was done at a police station nevertheless.
Yes, it was.
The one
Yes,
statement,
yes.
yeah.
Yes, thank you,
Okay.
Chair. Thank you. Where are you currently employed?
I'm employed by the South African Broadcasting Corporation, the SABC.
And what is the position that you hold there?
Chair, I'm the economics editor for the SABC. I'm responsible for all economics, finance, and business reporting across our 19 radio stations, our 4 channels, and our digital platform.
Could you just place on record your qualifications, please?
I'm concluding a Master's of Philosophy in International Business. I have a master's degree in journalism from the Columbia School of Journalism in New York. I have various business qualifications from INSEAD.
Too many to mention.
INSEAD, which is in Fontainebleau in Paris. I have various qualifications from Wits Business School, and yeah, I think
Yes.
I'll leave it at that.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, you see the humility prevents her from saying all of them.
Yes, thank you.
I did matriculate, however, at Epworth Girls High School in Pietermaritzburg.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank
And those qualifications, most of them are contained in paragraph 5 of your statement.
Indeed, they are.
Yes, thank you. Could you then tell the chairperson that I would imagine, maybe even without going into detail into what happened with the SABC 8, because your colleagues have already spoken to it, maybe you could just highlight the areas that Mr. Krige and Ms. Pillay have not dealt with in their evidence, which I believe you might have had listened to, or at least have had a look at what they testified to the commission about. Could you just highlight those areas that they have not dealt with?
Chair, they have broadly dealt with the sweep of most of the happenings. They have, however, left to me, I suppose, to deal with the human trauma and the smear campaigns, the victimizations, and the death of one of us, Suna.
Yes.
And I know that Footer must have dealt with the...
That's Mr. Krige.
That's
Yes.
Mr. Krige, sir.
Yes.
He must have dealt with the meeting in which we were dismissed, for which we were allegedly dismissed.
Well, I
That
can't remember whether he talked about the contents, the
I think
discussion. I didn't.
It spoke about him, largely.
Yes,
about his
maybe you
yes.
should. You can
Yes.
deal with that.
Every morning, Chair, there is a meeting at the SABC. It's held by the leadership of the newsroom across radio and TV. In those days, there were 2 meetings, and we were in a radio meeting. At this radio meeting, a discussion came up about whether to cover the objection by the activists, the civil society activists, to the protest policy. Now, a few days before that, the capital city was burning as the ANC ripped itself apart on the streets of the capital city. We were asked not to cover the events.
This is 2016.
Yes, sir.
Yes, I just want to locate it in terms of time, what you are talking about.
Chairperson, we were asked not to cover it in a normal journalistic way, using all the journalistic values and prescripts. We were asked instead to conceal the intensity of the fires that burned through the capital city. We were asked to stand under jacaranda trees. Well, our journalists were to stand under jacaranda trees and not show the burning capital city. For us, this is heinous. And at a previous meeting to the one for which we were fired, I asked and I pleaded with Ntate Debele. Simon Debele and I were rather close. We used to pray together. We used to eat breakfast in his office together some days.
Yes.
Just remind me what his position was at the time.
He was at the time head of news or acting head of news.
And head of news or acting head of news would be head of news for radio and TV.
Indeed, sir.
Okay.
And digital.
And digital, yes. Mm.
So having been a lecturer teaching journalism, I'm sure it must have been shocking, something that you was unheard of, that you could be told what to cover and what not to cover.
It is heinous to hide from citizens. It was heinous on a number of levels, 3 mainly. Firstly, to hide from citizens what they need to know about how they are governed and the public response. To be asked to mute the public voice in a democracy was, for me, a treasonous request. Then the second part was that our journalists were being constrained from practicing their vocation as they have been taught. I lectured in journalism at Rhodes University, and I began and started and founded the journalism department of Monash University, South Africa. And some of the students who come out of Rhodes inevitably end up in our newsroom, and some of them wash up from Monash in our newsroom. So some of my students reported to me, and those people that we taught ethics to at Rhodes, and we taught them writing, what were they to think of me if I was to endorse this after teaching them to do the opposite? The third part was not so much about the rights of freedom of expression, but the fact that in a cavalier way, we were being asked to bend the very mandate of public broadcasting. Now, I'm a diehard for the mandate of public broadcasting. Perhaps I should have said that in my CV. I cut my teeth in journalism at the Weekly Mail, which was a pro-democracy newspaper in the dark days of apartheid.
During the 80s.
During the 80s. And we were taught, and it was, really seeped into us that journalism is one of the democracy propellers, that in any democratic ecosystem, journalists are part of those who ought to be considered the guardians of governance. And so, having been reared in this way, and having reared and taught others this way, I couldn't sleep at night. I had the most amazing cognitive dissonance. So I begged Ndate, depending on our relationship together, Ndate, please, just let them free, let them get into Pretoria, ramp up deployment, please, Ndate.
I'm sorry, is that now still back at the meeting, or was it
This
after?
is a meeting before the meeting for which we were fired.
Oh,
And the
okay.
two-
That is the meeting where he said, the journalists mustn't show the full extent of what was happening in
Yes,
Pretoria.
this is the meeting at which he is operationalizing the protest policy.
Oh, okay, okay.
And it happened prior to the meeting for which he got really fed up and participated in our evacuation from the broadcaster.
Okay.
This is the previous meeting, and I looked around to colleagues and I said, please support me. Ndate, this has gone too far. Look behind you where we sit. Our editorial code sits behind us as we have this round meeting. Some of the colleagues wanted to speak, I could see, but something was constraining them. I turned to one of the other editors, and she said to me, "Akibatlu kena ditabeng." So I then
Well,
thought,
just give the English version. So,
she said, I do not wish to get into any trouble.
yes.
So that painted me in the eyes of others as somebody somewhat willing to get into this trouble. But in my own eyes, I'm somebody who's trying to expunge a guilt and a dissonance that I can ever be involved in such actions.
Yeah.
So the meeting for which we were fired, it was myself, it happened soon after the meeting about where they first operationalized the protest policy.
Oh, okay. Let's finish that meeting first. How
Yes.
did it end? Just give me some more discussion at that meeting where you were looking for support and there wasn't support forthcoming and so on.
Ndate Tebele was absolutely firm. He was absolutely firm that he wouldn't
You tried to
entertain
reason
my
with him,
pleas.
but it didn't work.
Yes.
So then you would, after the meeting, then you would be directed to simply implement that decision that he had taken.
Yes, I went back into the newsroom and I went around voicing my disgruntlement and my utter displeasure at what was going on.
Yes.
And
So then the next meeting would be the one that you moved to, the one where you were then fired.
before that, I got a call from...
I'm sorry, let's try if you can remember. We know it was 2016. Do you remember the month or
it was
even
winter.
the date? Maybe it's such an important meeting you would remember even the date, yeah.
It was the winter of our discontent. It was mid-2016.
Okay. Or it would, before the elections, so the elections would have been in May, I
Yes,
think.
sir.
More or less. They were not in June, I think that's for sure. So they would have been in May or April, I'm not sure, the elections.
Yes.
Or maybe, I may be
we'll
mistaken,
just-
actually.
yes,
I may be
just-
mistaken. I think it's the national ones that are normally held in April or May. 2016 was local government elections. I think
Yes.
those were
It
in
was
August.
the morning after the capital city went up in flames.
Okay, but now I seem to remember, I think they were held after May. It might have been even August, the local government elections, if I'm not mistaken. But I wanted to have a sense of
Time.
roundabout when in 2016 it was. But you're saying roundabout mid-2016.
Yes, sir.
I seem to recall that according to Ms. Pillai's evidence, it would be between around June, July, but I'm just looking for the exact dates from her statements.
No, that's fine. But
Yes,
winter.
Yes.
After that meeting, the initial meeting, the first meeting about the capital city and the coverage of the capital city, at which they first operationalized or wished for us to operationalize the protest policy, I received a call from a colleague, a fellow editor called Zolisa Skabi, and she told me that Bosisi Wenduli is looking for me. And I didn't know Busi at the time, and I was aware that throughout the newsroom there were pockets of discontent and rumblings about organizing something to respond to the increasingly heinous things that we were being asked to do. I went to see Busi, and I called her before, and I went to see her, and effectively she recruited me into the effort that later became the SABC 8. And it was prior to that. Together we went to see the Freedom of Expression Institute,
The two of you now.
the two of us.
Yeah. Is this the following day or same day of the meeting where they sought to operationalize the...
Chair, it was between the operationalizing meeting and the meeting for which we were subsequently dismissed.
But same day or different days?
It was different days.
Oh, okay, all right. You went to see the Freedom of Expression Institute?
Yes. We asked them whether there is any route legally to challenge the editorial policy of 2016. And we,
You had just heard for the first time at this meeting about this policy, or you had heard about it before, but they had not started operationalizing it?
so I was away at home in the Eastern Cape, and I returned to the capital city story and to the rumblings
okay.
in the newsroom,
Okay.
and to the call that Busi is looking for me.
Okay, okay.
And then I had a meeting with Busi, and she invited everybody, but unfortunately there were only two of us in that meeting, Busi and myself. And we decided to then go to the Freedom of Expression Institute to ask them if we could find a way, as staff members of the SABC, to have the 2016 policy set aside. And we also wanted to know what we could do about the protest policy legally. Then we went about our business, went back to our different departments and began to work. And then I went into a meeting, the normal diary meeting. And this is the meeting that in Joe Toller's report he describes as the diary meeting from hell. In the meeting...
Just to make sure one understands, at the Freedom of Expression Institute, did you leave there to go back on the basis that they were going to look into the issues we have raised to see how to help you?
Indeed, they said they would investigate how to help us because they've got a pro bono legal clinic attached to them.
Okay, all right. So you went back.
So we went back, and we also phoned the CPJ, the Committee for the Protection of Journalists in New York. And we were trying to find a way of telling them what we are going through. Then we went into our different departments, giving each other tasks, Busi and I, to recruit other people and to speak to other people. And it's in this context that we spoke to Jacques and to Krivani. Then we went into this meeting, and Busi wasn't there. It was chaired by Jonathan Lungu from Mpumalanga, and he was somewhat assisted by Zolisa Sgabi back here at home in terms of keeping the Johannesburg crowd going. Ndate Tebele came in and asserted himself in the meeting, and he primarily said that one of the top slugs, a slug is we name a story, we just give it a quick name, and then we give a brief indication of what the story is about, and then we assign journalists to cover it, and then we tell what time is to be delivered. So Ndate said the slug called protest, I think it was called protest, which was the slug referring to the protest by the Right to Know campaign at different SABC facilities, I think in Durban and in Cape Town. That story was to be banned or canned or just wasn't to happen.
Sorry, just as a matter of interest, that Right to Know story, did it relate to this policy?
Yes. It related to the protest policy. They were protesting the public's right to know from its own public broadcaster.
Yes.
Do you know whether at that stage they were acting simply because they might have seen in the media that the SABC was had adopted this policy, or whether they may have been contacted by the Freedom of Expression Institute or anything, or you don't know?
No, what I am aware of is a mushrooming of discontent throughout the media industry and civil society.
Yes.
After the issuing by the SABC of a media statement about the protest policy.
Okay. Yes, I think we interrupted you while you were telling us about continuing to tell us about the meeting, diary meeting, I think.
Yes. At the meeting, Deputy Chief Justice, I then asked Ndate Tebele to cover the story, to allow us to cover the story. And he said no, he was quite adamant And given that I had already experienced his firmness around the capital city burning, I decided to also put my own foot down. And I said, Ndade, with regards to this, it's a matter that's really concerning for the entire, newsroom and the media industry. And I suspect it's a matter that may well end up in the courts of this country. I wish to be recorded as dissenting. So Futa Krige also expressed similar views, and Suna Fenter, the late, said that she may be the youngest among us, but she believes that she shouldn't, kick off her journalism career in this fashion, and that she really, she felt that she
needed to take a position.
Yes, and she took a firm stand in that meeting and said that she wouldn't associate herself with this. Thereafter, it wasn't that caustic a discussion. It wasn't, and Dade seemed to be quite composed, and Dade Tebele, that is, seemed, to accept our right to dissent. And Jonathan then proceeded with the meeting, and he closed the meeting. I've even read his affidavit about what time the meeting closed, and his version tallies with mine. And then thereafter, we went about our business, and we thought that his decision would hold. But soon after that, we were called into his office and served with suspension letters.
Before you got served with suspension letters, both at the first meeting and at the diary meeting, did he ever provide whatever it is that he regarded as justification for saying that the protests in Pretoria shouldn't be shown properly the way it should be shown by journalists, and two, for saying that the protest by the Right to Know organization should not be shown? Did he provide any reasons?
At several points, he said that he has his instructions.
And did he ever say who the instruction came from?
No, but I don't need to be 2 years old to have guessed.
You knew where it came from?
Indeed, I did.
Yes. Did it come from Mr. Msoneng?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Oh, sorry, I beg your pardon.
Yes. No, I'm done. You can continue.
I apologize.
Yeah. Yes.
Sorry. Ordinarily, when there's dissent, as there was at this meeting, what usually happens, because look, you have recorded your disapproval of whatever it is that they wanted to do, and the journalists they wanted to cover the story. So if then there is that kind of dissenting voice, what would ordinarily happen, let's say, if you're in a normal environment?
In a normal environment, dissent is accommodated. We agree to disagree, and somebody with the power to decide decides.
Yes.
I guess that if it's the editor who decides, that's more acceptable to the journalists in the newsroom than if it's somebody outside of the newsroom. Is that right?
Indeed.
Yeah.
But generally, newsrooms are not peaceful places. There are
debates and disagreements.
Scrapes of ideas. There are marketplaces
debates
of the trade of ideas.
Yes, yes. But there, everybody is used to that, and everybody knows in the end the editor has a job to do, and sometimes you'll agree with him or her, sometimes you won't agree. But what's most unacceptable is somebody from outside deciding.
Not really. Chair, I should have told you that this tenure of mine at the SABC was my third.
Yes.
I had had previous tenures in different environments.
Yes.
And in the environment led under Zwelakhe Sisulu, a debate was one of the most welcome things.
Yeah.
Because it would lead us to better policies, and the more vigorous, the better.
Yes.
And it enlivened the newsroom,
Yes.
and it created for a certain passion, a certain air of freedom, a certain Prague Spring that the SABC experienced when we were there in the dying years of the apartheid regime. So I was accustomed to that culture.
Yes.
And I was failing to adapt to the new culture where silence and compliance and robotic decisions were the order of the day.
Now, when there were instructions such as these that you were very opposed to, that came from the COO or acting COO, did you consider that you could go to the CEO or acting CEO and say, but this is what the COO is saying and it's unacceptable to us, and that maybe there could be an intervention, or was the position that no intervention from the CEO was expected to happen once the COO had spoken?
Formally, there is a referral upwards, which formally rested with the CEO prior to Hlaudi Motsoeneng inaugurating the editorial policy of 2016. And Chair, when he inaugurated it at that Bosberat in Machalis, he basically said he is the Alpha and the Omega. Now, after that, every CEO was a lame duck, frankly.
Yes.
Every CEO was dead in the water.
So
was, after that, was he like the de facto CEO?
He was the Alpha and the Omega.
And the Omega.
sir.
thank you. So then this is all, then these meetings happen, and then let's get to the meeting then where you were finally dismissed.
So, Chair, we get called up one by one, the three of us.
That's yourself, Mr. Krieger, and Ms. Pillay.
And Suna, the late Suna.
Or Ms. Venter.
Yes,
So does that make four? Or,
the three of us. The
Oh.
others were party to a different disciplinary, but those disciplinaries happened on the same day.
okay, so it was yourself, Ms. Venter, and Mr. Krieger.
Yes,
Okay.
but we were called in one by one,
One by
and
one.
separately.
Okay,
In fact, we didn't know that we had been called in until
Yes.
we called each other
To
when the
find-
rumors began to percolate
Yes.
later in the evening. And it was a question of, oh, so you also, and you also. And we then concluded that the three of us had spoken out in that meeting. This must be the premise on which they're going to move against us.
So when you were called, you were just given the letter of suspension without any discussion of any consequence, really, or there was some discussion?
When I was called, Ndate Debele was seated to my left, and Sibulelo Ditlakanyana was seated to my right. Opposite me was the head of HR, Mani Alu, head of HR in the news division. And I said to Ndate Debele, this is unlawful, and I hate to say this to you, but we're going to relate through the courts now. And I turned to Sibulelo and I said that she's a very sweet human being. And it's a pity that we stand at odds. And I was then accompanied to my office to clear my desk. And then
The suspension was with immediate effect.
it was immediate. Ndate Debele was very firm that the corporation has decided to part ways with me.
So from that,
But I'm sorry. This was a suspension and not a dismissal?
No,
as
it's
yet?
a suspension now.
Okay, all right.
But Dr. Tabele at that meeting was very firm that the corporation has decided to part ways.
And is that the term he used, part ways?
Yes, to part ways. And that they've made this decision, and he insisted that I sign the letter and receipt of the letter, which I did do. And then Mani accompanied me to my office and took my clocking devices. And by then, my colleagues could see what's going on. It looks like a frog march out of the building, and people are trying to hold on to me and to say goodbye, and people are baffled, and I couldn't even say goodbye to my teams. And so he marched me out of the building, but oddly, as the SABC is a very paradoxical place. It's a very loving, humane place, but it also can be a very vicious place. So as he's marching me towards the turnstiles where, you know, the gates of no return, he asks me if I can hug him to say goodbye, because we basically had a good relationship. So the whole thing about capture is that it ruptures relationships, it victimizes people, it devastates, it creates trauma.
Yes. All right. So then that's how then after that, then there was a dismissal.
Then after that...
That's the suspension that you're dealing with, yes.
Then after that, I went to the Freedom of Expression Institute
yes.
to arrange a revolt.
I'm sorry. The letter said you were suspended until what would happen? Until the hearing or what? Usually you'd be suspended pending a disciplinary hearing.
Deputy Chief Justice, I think it's identical to Krivani's, no, Krivani didn't it's
Yes.
identical to Kricha's
Yes.
suspension letter.
I think I saw it was on
Okay, maybe she can have a look at it.
Yes.
But do you have any recollection whether it said something along those lines, that you were suspended and you must appear at a disciplinary hearing on a certain date, and that these were the charges that you would face?
I think it mentioned something about a refusal to carry out an instruction.
Yes.
Something about insubordination.
Insubordination, yes.
But it didn't name a date on which we would be afforded an opportunity to defend ourselves.
Oh.
But I may be mistaken. I can't recall. There have been so many letters and so much litigation.
Okay. They'll check if you think it's the same. But if later on there is a chance of getting the one that was addressed to you, that would be helpful.
I can make it available.
Yes, okay.
Thank you. Did you ultimately appear then before disciplinary hearing?
Well, on that day, after I was suspended, I drove out and I went back to the FXI, and I phoned around, and obviously I got in touch with Busi, and to organize a revolt, to bring it on, because we felt that we owed it to the country to be heard, and to be heard on this issue. So we organized a meeting with civil society. We sat at De La Creme in Melville, ironically where we used to sit to debate how we would have a public broadcaster in the Zwelakhe days instead of a state broadcaster. And we decided to march to the Constitutional Court, and that Kricha, myself and Suna would lead the march. And it's for our statements as we marched and as we drew attention of the public to the happenings at the SABC that Mr. Motsoeneng and his cohorts refer to as your willful speaking out of turn, speaking out to the press and so on.
Yes.
But you might not recall the exact wording that was used to describe the charges, or what the letter said you had done wrong. But do you remember that whatever the wording was, it related to the stand you had taken against this policy and against the instructions that had been given that you have told me about.
Indeed.
That much you know.
That much I know. Indeed,
Okay.
it is true.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And then when were you then brought before someone who was going to discipline you?
Yes.
And who was that person?
We were given 24 hours notice to
Yes.
appear before a disciplinary hearing.
Yes.
There were three people in the disciplinary hearing on the other side,
Yes.
and there were three of us. There was myself, Suna Venter, and Futa Kricha.
Yes. And the disciplinary proceeded?
No, it wasn't meant to be. They were not serious, they were joking, they were just kicking time, and they just allowed the lawyer to argue about legal representation, and they postponed the hearing.
Yes. And then after that postponement, is that the matter that ended up in the labor court?
After the postponement, we were just fired.
Yes. Yes. And then,
I'm sorry,
Sorry.
there was it Mr. Cliff or Ms. Pillay, or it was Ms. Pillay who was asked to submit representations by 4 o'clock on a certain date, I think. So
Yes, we all
that
did
did not happen, or it happened with
We
you as
all
well?
did that,
Yes.
yes.
But was the date the same?
It was all the same.
Oh, okay, okay.
And then after that, they rejected our representations and they dismissed us. And this
Yes.
is when we lodged the matter in the
Labor
Labor
court.
court.
Yes, okay.
And this is when we took our constitutional court matter up.
Yes, yes,
Thank
yes.
you. Thank you. I would like us then to deal with specific matters, because now that you've confirmed what Mr. Kriche and Ms. Pillay had testified to about your having been dismissed from the SABC, I think you deal with quite important topics
Right.
in your statement at page 3, instances of political interference in the news agenda and mandate of the SABC. And you deal there with about 2 instances, and I would like you to just take the chair through those. The one refers to what was popularly known as the Nene Gate, and the circumstances around what was supposed to happen in the news about that matter quickly.
May I remind you, sir, that I'm economics editor?
Yes.
So the issue around Nenegate affected me and my department. It was our responsibility to tell the South African public about the value of the money in their pockets, the plunge of the rand, the inflationary implications of that, as well as the rise in the price of the bond yields, and everything that happened around the slump in the currency.
Basically, the economic implications of what happened as a result of the dismissal of Mr. Nene.
Yes, the
Yeah.
most. You will recall, sir, that it was the 9th of December.
9th of December 2015.
Yes, indeed. And that the following day was the 10th. So the following day, we run across the SABC platforms updates on the currencies of other countries, as well as the emerging markets and the BRICS currencies. So we report on these, as is our duty and our mandate, every single day. What moves currencies is our bread and butter. We need to analyze that. We need to bring in analysts who explain what is happening so that people can make good commercial decisions, people can trade meaningfully and in a well-informed manner, and people can make long-term economic decisions affecting their debt levels, their interests, what interest rates they would get from the banks, and so on and so forth. So when Nothando Maseko attempted, first very gingerly, to engage me, asking me to veer away from mentioning the conduct of the president and the political factors moving the rand on those days.
This is now in relation to the 9th of December 2015. Whereabout are we when that happened? When
We're on the 10th.
On the 10th.
Or
okay.
the 11th.
Okay.
And it's already a storm, and the team is very busy at the moment. So initially I'm baffled by this assertion, and I don't respond immediately. Instead, I go and check the emerging market index. Now, the emerging market index is, there are two. There's the JP Morgan one, and then there's the general MSCI, right? So it'll tell us how the rand is doing in relation to its peers, because the emerging market currencies normally track a certain, they respond to external or exogenous factors in a similar fashion. For example, that December had been a very busy December for the markets. The United States was tidying up and mopping up when it had cheapened its rand, so they were mopping up excess liquidity in their financial system. They were tapering off the quantitative easing program. So that would have had the effect of strengthening their currency and weakening the emerging market ones, and so on and so forth. I also checked what was happening in November with the rand. The rand was doing well compared to its peers, something variance of 7%. And I'm not one who believes that necessarily a strong currency is a good thing or a weak one is a good thing. It's all relative. But on these days, the rand was doing something unique. And what I found strange about the request not to look at the political economy and the events, in the political events that may have had effects on the rands, the equities markets, the bond markets, and the huge sell-off that happened as a result, was that Brazil was going through something similar that December, and I never got a request not to mention the impeachment of Dilma Rousseff and the resignation of the finance minister in Brazil, and Mexico had its own wobbles at the same time. So, and their currencies responded to those happenings. So the issue of whether the rand is trading a fair value, what's determining the value, the current value of the rand, is our bread and butter at the economics department. So to be asked not to tell the public about what's driving the value of the rand in their pocket, for me is another treasonous request.
Yes.
And yeah, so I basically decided not to tell the members of my team, and just to proceed with covering the rand as everybody else was doing.
Is it even possible not to take into account the political climate when you're looking at the performance of the rand, or is it something that you can actually just ignore and focus on the financial markets without even looking at the political climate?
But that's not possible to extricate political uncertainty to market movements.
Yes, thank you.
When you were asked not to deal with this in your coverage, was that something you expected by then that could happen, and it could come from the person that came from, or it was strange that she came to you, that she came with that instruction or request?
It wasn't so much strange as it was alarming and annoying. And the request and the things that she said in trying to prevail on me, like the rand has been trading badly for a while, it's not the president's behavior that has done this, as well as...
But why was she coming to you? Why did she, think you were going to say it's because of the president?
No,
necessarily.
she's coming to me to prevail on me not to follow the general narrative around.
Or outside.
Outside.
Okay.
And to dim the spotlight on the conduct of the president and its economic impact.
Yes, thank you. And you refer to that conduct of hers as being illogical and unjournalistic in paragraph 9, is that correct?
Indeed, I still maintain it was illogical and unjournalistic.
Thank you. And then in paragraph...
Sorry, Mr. Newman. That instruction, is it one of those in respect of which you would say it wasn't just coming from her, it was coming from the COO, even though she might not have said so herself, or you don't know?
I don't know. However, a bizarre set of events happened. A Sunday soon after that, we carried the views of the president on what had happened. And basically, President Zuma said that it was an overreaction, really, and that the markets had overreacted. And he also said that the rand had been trading badly for a while, and he also said something to the effect that he doesn't believe that the currency should be something that you can trade in. He seemed to say that it should be just a store of value and a form of exchange, but not something that you can trade in, which was besides the point to what was actually going on and the actual value lost in the economy and the obligation we have as the public broadcaster to basically tell the public what their currency is doing.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And then can you also highlight another incident when you deal with the mandate of the SABC at paragraph 10, page 4, where somebody handed you a file for you to investigate. Could you talk to that?
Yes. Nyana, I was in his office, and Nyana and I...
Miss Nyana...
Mr. Nyana Mulete. Yes.
Okay.
Mr.
Is it Mulete?
Mulete, yes.
Yes, okay.
He handed me this file, I think rather reluctantly. And he said that it contained allegations about certain machinations or misdemeanors committed by Pravin Gordhan at SARS. So I took the file and I said I would have a look at it. I read the file. There was absolutely, it was a whole lot of people recorded speaking about Mr. Pravin Gordhan. And I could see no wrongdoing that they are alleging. I mean, yes, it appeared they didn't like him, but that is not a story. I just ignored it for a while, trying to think what to do about it. And then I was called by a relative who said, Jimmy Manyi says that I'm sitting on a file and I'm supposed to be investigating this file, and I'm supposed to do something about this investigation. Then I told Nyana and the others that I would do something about the file only if the people making these allegations, which are very frivolous as far as I could see, would go and depose themselves in an affidavit at a police station or wherever. And once charges had been officially preferred to Mr. Pravin Gordhan, I would then fetch the docket and the file, and then I would do something about it, because I felt that I would be opening up the corporation and myself to a defamation suit, which I could not honorably acquit myself of. Like, how would I get out of that? And besides, it would be fruitless and wasteful expenditure. I've determined this, using my journalistic and editorial judgment, that this file there is no story here until it's official. And if I were to just run with this file, what would I be doing? To besmirch somebody's good name, which he has a right to? On just spurious grounds. So I decided to tell Nyana, I think I actually wrote an email to this effect, that let the people making the allegations depose themselves under oath in an affidavit and go to the police, and then once the police have charged this gentleman, I will go and fetch the docket and the file.
Did Ms. Mulete tell you where she got the file from that she was giving you?
I'm sorry to correct you, sir. It's a gentleman.
On the
Yes, I
first
see
line
the
of
error.
paragraph 10 in brackets, it's written MS. Can you see that in your statement?
Yes, sir.
That's an error.
Yes, it's an
Oh,
error. I apologize.
it's a man. Okay.
It's a man.
Okay. Thank you. Yes. Did he tell you where he got the file from when he gave it to
I think
you?
casually he mentioned that Jimmy Manyi
Gave it to him.
yeah,
Okay.
was a bit anxious about
Yes.
no movement on this file.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The time now is 4 o'clock. This witness still has some ground to cover.
Yes, I know there's a lot of ground to cover.
Yes,
Well, there are two possibilities,
yes.
depending on what the situation is tomorrow in terms of witnesses and in terms of Ms. Kubulembegi's own situation.
Yes.
We could stop and continue tomorrow, or we could continue. I'm available. We could continue until 5
Yes.
if you're available and Ms. Kubulembeg is available.
Yes, Chair. I would prefer that we continue, because I have a request to make to you, Chair, about tomorrow.
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Would that be convenient to you?
Indeed, sir.
Okay, all right. Let's continue then.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. So then, in paragraph 11 and
Or
onwards,
maybe we should take
just a 5 minutes.
some comfort break of 10 minutes.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, let's resume at 10 past 4.
Thank you.
We adjourn.
All rise.
Yes, let's proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Rubule Mbeki, you speak then from paragraph 11, right up to all the sub-paragraphs in paragraph 12 of the threats then that they directed at you and the other journalists at the SABC 8.
Indeed.
Yes. Could you just summarize, because the chairperson has read your statement, just summarize briefly those threats that you believe that they are. I'm not suggesting that there's any threats that are not important, but just to summarize the ones that you wish to place on record.
And maybe to also emphasize that that's not to pressurize you not to tell your story.
Yes.
You know, you would know what you would like to put forward as part of telling the Commission what you experienced, and so in the end, we want to do justice to that while you are here.
Thank you, Deputy Chief Justice. On the phone, I received the following threats on my phone. Two of them were mainly directed at Suna Fenter, who, for some reason, our assailants had decided to focus on and to terrorize her. And some of them just envelope us in this attempt to terrorize Suna. One of the death threats that she received said, "Enough, girl, you are first to bleed to death." So this is the one that was, we believe, was directed at the late Suna Fenter. And it was received on Tuesday, the 13th of December, 2016, at 17:05 p.m. by SMS. I have given my phone over to the Commission,
Yes.
to the Forensics Department to
Yes.
scrub through these.
Yes.
Yes. And then
Another one,
second one, yes.
another SMS, also from the same number, 084-923-4036, said, "To us, the black members of the SABC 8, traitors protecting your white friends in Parliament who started this, telling lies about your comrades. You were warned, we don't kill blacks, but sit and watch the blood flow."
Sure.
This text message was received by other members of the SABC 8 too, and it came from that same number, 084-923-4036, as an SMS.
The first one, you said it was directed at Ms. Fenter,
Yes.
but you didn't get it from her. You got it from another number. In other words, she's not the one who forwarded it to you to see what she had received.
We had a WhatsApp group, and everything that we received, we would
was
just
shared.
dump on that WhatsApp group.
Oh,
Excuse me.
so I was wondering why it came to you if it was not sent, if it was directed at her and it was not sent to you by her. And I was wondering whether the idea was to intimidate, threaten you as well and others by letting you know what was being directed at her. But you say that it was
Yes.
sent to the
It
common
was sent
WhatsApp
to,
group.
it was sent to Suna, and
Yes.
Suna then shared it.
Or it was sent to her and then she said it, she shared it on the group,
Yes.
the WhatsApp group.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And then
all
the
right.
second one was sent to all of us,
Okay.
the 8, including Galata
Yes.
and Vuyomvoko.
Yes.
And then on Monday...
And how far was this in terms of time now and date from the date when you were dismissed? Where are we in terms of time when this was happening?
The bulk of the threats came post our reinstatement.
After you had been reinstated?
After we had been reinstated.
Oh, so this is likely to have happened after you had been reinstated?
Yes, sir.
These two threats?
Chairperson, most of the threats happened post our reinstatement.
Yes. Oh, that's... does that mean that there may have been quite a very tense opposition to your reinstatement, and those people might not have wanted you to be reinstated?
Indeed, when we first, upon our reinstatement, we were told by our lawyers to report to work. And on the first day that we reported to work, we were turned back. They came to the turnstiles to meet us there, and they said, "You better go back, we are appealing." And then by the end of that day, I remember I was at a civil society meeting on the SABC 8. We were called and told that the SABC is now ready to reinstate us.
Yes, okay, yes.
Thank you. And then you speak about something that happened on Monday, 18 December 2017.
Yes, a picture of a child is on a fake Twitter account, which, I don't know, it's got my name on it, this Twitter account, and it's got my name, Thandeka Krubule, on it, and I do not own a Twitter account or a Twitter handle or a Twitter address. I am not on Twitter. And these people are tweeting all sorts of things about other people. It almost looks like it's in my name. And I had to make an announcement at work that this is not my Twitter handle. This is just creating heat for me. I have no intention of going onto Twitter. And then the following SMS.
Sorry, before you move on from that one, you mentioned something about a picture of your daughter that was
Yes,
linked to
it's a
that
picture
account.
of Kanye Selekubule on this account, which I hope has since been demobilized.
Yes.
So the roping in of family and people's children in attempts to inveigle them in trouble is most cruel,
Yes.
Deputy Chief.
I guess that this was to say, we know your child, we know your daughter, or something like that, as part of intimidation or threats, maybe?
I don't know.
Okay.
Thank you.
Obviously, you would be concerned if people who are threatening you know your child,
Indeed.
therefore can identify or recognize her
Yes.
somewhere.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
So the following SMS, which appears to have been directed at not only Ms. Fenter, but sending this message, I think, to all SABC 8, it said, "Too scared to go to Parliament, forcing your comrades to betray themselves for your agenda. We've been patient, warned you." It came from the number 078-492-3436.
Yes. And I would imagine with all these threats that you're receiving on your phones, you would have then had to approach the police.
We approached the police.
Yes. What happened?
Several times we met with the police and we were interviewed. We offered them our phones, and the police never came to our help at all.
They took statements, they took your phones. Did they come back to say, our investigation has challenges because of A, B, C, D, or we there's no way we can establish who was behind these things. Did they come back to make that report back or anything like that?
They did say that the threats were being made by through those disposable phones, burn phones apparently, and that there is no way to discern who actually was sending
behind
these
them.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Yes, and then you make, in paragraph 14, you deal with you approaching General of Intelligence.
Yes, we approached the Inspector General of Intelligence. We first wrote to him, Dr. Dintwe. We wrote several letters and he gave us an audience. We met with him. That meeting with him was attended by myself, Suna Venter, Busisiwe Ntuli, and Futa Kriche. We were promised a report but never received one. Busisiwe wrote to him severally after the meeting to inquire as to how far the Office of the Inspector General for Intelligence is on all the matters, including the threats and the requests and the news that certain people from national intelligence had been requested to be deployed at the SABC. So we received correspondence from his office saying that the matter is still receiving attention, but we have never received a report.
Up to today.
Till today, sir.
So it was just the acknowledgement of receipt of correspondence and saying the investigation was going on, but nothing further.
Indeed.
And that was 2016.
That was
Now it's 2019.
2017.
2017.
2017?
Yes.
Okay. Now it's 2019. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. And then you move on to deal with two incidents of break-ins in properties of some of your colleagues, which were like 2 days apart, the 6th and 8th of October 2017.
Yes. On the 6th of October, Suna's home was broken into and her house was trashed. The pictures on my phone indicate the scale of the destruction at her home.
Yes.
On the 8th of October, Busisiwe Ntuli, her house was broken into. And on the same day, the 8th of October, Mr. Futa Kriche's one property, the caretaker there, was held up at gunpoint.
Yes.
On the 3rd of November, our lawyer, at the time, Mr. Aslam Musaji, who acted for us while he worked at Norton Rose Fulbright, and we believe he headed up the pro bono department, and he acted vigorously for us. And he received a text message to drop the Constitutional Court case that we had lodged.
And then going forward, you deal with what was now happening with you at work in paragraph 18.
Yes.
Yes.
I'm sorry, before that, did you get to know where the text message came from that went to Mr. Musaji?
No, not to my knowledge.
Okay, all right.
Yes, thank you. You may proceed. Paragraph 18. Thank you.
So this point deals with the almost half day where I couldn't work because my computer had been remotely taken over, and it just moved on its own for ages. And I called the IT department. I said, please, guys, I need to work. I can't work. And they said, no, we're working with this computer. We've remotely taken it over. I said, maybe it's got a virus. Can you work with it quickly? And the computer just, for hours, just carried on just doing its own thing, showing files. And so I just filmed it. And I left it at that. But I found it horrific.
Yes. Thank you. And paragraph 19, you deal with what?
Yes,
An audit query? Was it an audit query?
yes.
Yes.
An audit query came to me saying that I had failed to disclose a business interest. And it said that this company now had business with the SABC, and it's called Indiza Media. At first, I couldn't recall what this could be referring to because, as far as I know, I had no interest in this company, and I have never received anything from a company called Indiza Media. And I looked at this letter, which purported to come from the Auditor General's office, phoned the Auditor General's office to find out, trying to follow through. Nobody knew anything about this letter. But then there was a little box at the end, and it next to my own pers number, which is my SABC employee number, they had the name of businesswoman Danisa Baloi. Now, the background to this is that many years ago, I was invited to serve on the board of Indiza Media. I was then told that this company is insolvent, it's going into liquidation, and there's no such company anymore. I never received any money or anything from the company. So...
but you had been invited to serve on it?
On the board, yes.
On the board, invited by whom?
By the then CEO Jabulani Mabaso. Yeah.
Of a company called this?
A company called Indiza.
Yes.
Yes.
But when you discovered after he had invited you that the company was going through liquidation, or he is the one who told you?
I think I attended about 2 meetings there, and I was told that the company is going to be shut down and that this...
Oh, after you had started attending meetings there?
Yes,
Oh.
and that this is going into liquidation. And,
Yeah.
yes.
So you had become a board member before
Yes.
it went into
Yes.
liquidation?
Yes.
Okay.
And I had disclosed that at my previous
Yes,
job as
yes.
required.
Yes.
But that it now pops up at the SABC
Yes.
with my purse number next to Danisa Baloi's name. It was most baffling. And I had to vigorously refuse
Was
this.
she in any way involved with the company as far
Yes,
as you
she
knew?
was.
She was?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. And in paragraph 20, you deal with a day when you were accosted by the police and the SABC security. Could you just quickly tell the chair about that incident?
I was on my way to meet people who can be described as whistleblowers from within PRASA. I was due to meet them somewhere in the Cresta area. So I was in a hurry, and I was leaving the TV building of the SABC. When I had passed through the turnstiles, I was approached by the SABC security. They were in the company of the Brixton Police. Now, the SABC and the Brixton Police Station have got a long relationship. And the gentleman asked me to come into the little security room and wanted me to make a statement about the death threats. And
This was now an SABC security?
SABC security together with a gentleman from Brixton Police.
Yes. Without any appointment, you knew nothing about
No
this?
appointment, no indication that they were coming. It's embarrassing. It looks like an arrest. The reception is full. It's just downright humiliating. And my colleagues were so worried that they phoned the union when they saw me being whisked into this little office, as though I'm being arrested or something like that. It's very defamatory, just the whole scene. And while I was inside, the unions and the union leader called, and I told the police that I have got a trust problem because they haven't resolved the issue of what happened to Suna. And Suna is dead now, and how can I trust them? And they then said that they received instructions from across the road. Across the road is Radio Park, where the authorities, the big authorities in the SABC sit. And they also said that they had received an email that this was to happen to me, and that the cops were to be called for me, and I must hand over my phone to the cops. Then,
This is in November 2017, according to
yes,
paragraph 20.
yes. And
Would this have been now out of the blue, in the sense that it was not close to the events of your dismissal and your reinstatement?
it was close to me writing a letter of concern to the authorities at the SABC about a scary gentleman sending me a message on Telegram.
Yes.
He's since deleted his Telegram message, so I can't find it on my phone.
Okay.
But the gentleman worked in the presidency. And this message, maybe I'm paranoid, but I did ask Busi, what should I feel and think about this message? Should I be fearful? And Busi said, you mustn't take anything lying down, like at face value. It's of concern. And I then, the unions called around, and a colleague called Zonke Smith came to wait outside to see if I'm okay. And we then went to sit in the car park together because I completely refused to cooperate with the police. They wanted me to come to Brixton the following day to chat to the Brixton guys, and just to fob him off, because I noticed that he was wearing a green, yellow, and black T-shirt underneath his tracksuit, which made me wonder if he's in a condition to take a statement. So I went to sit in my car in the car park with Zonke Smith. I must say, Chairperson, by now I was falling apart, crying uncontrollably, and I then called Brixton and gave the gentleman's name and his service number to the Brixton police. And they told me he's off duty. Now, how can an off-duty cop take a statement from me? I was so baffled. So here's a cop on a frolic of his own, doing favors for people across the road. What is to be thought of the South African police in this context? Are they in hock to a toxic network inside the SABC that's hell-bent on terrorizing us? So that was what was in my mind, Deputy Chief Justice.
The names of these people, the security guy,
Yes.
I guess you would know because he was SABC based, is that right?
Yes.
And then this off-duty policeman, obviously you got to know the name.
Yes.
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 Was anything done, particularly in regard to his conduct, from your side to take it further? As soon as they left you alone, you decided you didn't want to do anything about it. Just wondering, it just sounds very strange that when he's off duty, he is engaged in something like that, and it's not clear exactly why he would be involved in that when he's off duty.
He was asked to do so by the people in Radio Park.
Yes, that's why I want to find out whether anything was done later to report his conduct, because how can he, being a police officer and then being off duty, carry out instructions from anywhere other than from the police.
This was his conduct, truthfully, Chief Justice, and I have no idea of what possessed him to behave in this manner.
But as far as you know, nothing further happened, or nothing happened to him after that about his conduct?
No, nothing happened to him as far as I know.
I don't see his name here. Have you given the name to the commission by any chance?
Yes, I will give the name to the commission.
Yes, I think that's very concerning, and something needs to, that kind of conduct needs to be reported.
Yes, sure. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, it may well be that if what you have in this statement, because maybe it might not be focusing enough on his conduct, it may be that it's not enough, it may be that it might be necessary to do another statement that focuses on what his role was in that whole thing. All right?
I understand, Chief Justice.
But you will you will indicate if it's something you would rather not raise again, or what? I'm just saying that because sometimes when people have gone through certain situations, sometimes they don't want to have those things, those stories revisited. But it's something that concerns me quite a lot, and it's not something that one would wish to just go away like that.
Yes, sir, I'll indicate.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And then in paragraph 21, you deal with an incident when you and your colleagues were chased by a car until you reached a certain Shell garage, where then later you were able to view the footage and you got to get the name of the person who was chasing you, and there is currently litigation.
That was a very scary thing. Please tell me
Yes.
about it.
Yes, ma'am. I'm a big admirer of the late economist Sampieter Blanche. So when his colleagues, the other economists under the coordination of Patrick Bond and his colleagues, organized at one of the facilities of the University of Johannesburg a retrospective look at his main economic contributions and his theoretical work over the span of his lifetime. The reason for this was that he was dying of cancer. I had worked with his daughter, Christelle, in my early journalistic career, and really read his work a lot, especially his book, A History of Inequality. So I was so excited that his colleagues are doing this for him, and that it would afford us the opportunity to speak to him and his colleagues, well, to speak about his work, especially on the idea of a wealth tax for South Africa. I pitched it at the Morning Diary meeting, and I said I would cover it myself. I took the live view, which is sort of like a mobile satellite and a camera. I was with an intern by the name of Hilda and a camera woman by the name of Vanessa. We went to this facility in Westdean, and we arrived late, but we covered the story, and we crossed using the satellite into the 1 o'clock news and interviewed people. Then we were packing up later on after we had accomplished our task, and we were getting ready to go and package a mini story, like it's a tiny little documentary. It's a news item for the evening news on Sampieter Blanche's work. When we were driving out of this facility, the facility is on a sort of incline, and we went towards a stop sign. And it's important that it's a stop sign, not a red robot or a robot. We then, after crossing over onto the other side, heard the screeching of a car. And we thought, the guy is in trouble. Should we just linger a bit to see what's happening? And we even wondered if we've done something to cause this. But then it became clear, because we stopped there for a while to see if we can attend to the car. For a few minutes, we just sat in the car. Then this car gave chase. And it was a furious chase. We phoned the office and we screamed into the handset, "We're under attack, we're under attack." And Lemise Gilbert at the office was wondering, what's going on? Where are you? What's your GPS location? And obviously we couldn't tell where we were anymore, because we were no longer stopping at robots, we were no longer stopping at stop signs anymore, because
And that itself was dangerous.
we were endangering everyone. And we had tried at different points to think, oh, maybe we are being hijacked, we must surrender the equipment, we must surrender ourselves. We then found ourselves, it had begun to drizzle, we found ourselves on a roundabout, coming through First Street in Melville and dipping towards the Shell garage. Because of the speed at which we were approaching, I saw the petrol attendants put their hands on their heads as we were approaching the garage. And I was begging Vanessa, please, let's surrender now. The cameras must be here. Let's do something. Let's get out of the car. Maybe we're safe now. And then he charged right there in the garage, and Vanessa said, no ways. I'm driving like crazy. So we were driving this car. She drove this car like a mad woman. She saved our lives on that day. And exhausted, we climbed up. She went and put the car there. And I said, Vanessa, you're never going to drive this SABC car again. And the intern was trembling in the back seat. And there was a lot of, obviously, crying, wondering what's happened. Because we had lost the car in the slipstream of traffic on Empire Road. So we parked the car and entered the building. And I went through to Nyana Molete's office, and I found him there with Kenneth McAteers, one of our seniors. And they told us to go to the Brixton police. Vanessa went to the Brixton police station, and she wrote me a letter saying that a certain Sergeant Vilagazi at the Brixton police station refused to take the case, refused to open a case, not even a case of intimidation. So I traveled, and then I went back to the garage, and a gentleman who's in the management and ownership of the garage, long-bearded gentleman, he's no longer there now, gave me on Patrick Bond's USB the incident as recorded by the cameras. And he helped me to isolate the number plate and footer Krige, then traced the number plate to a car leasing entity in the East Rand. I then phoned the car leasing entity in the East Rand, and they told me that the car was not leased to an individual but to a company. This company is Schindler Lifts. Schindler Lifts has a multi-million rand contract with the SABC to fix about 16 lifts and 4 walkways escalators. It occurred to me to go to Mr. Matebula, the head of SABC Security, just to ask about Schindler, and I went to the car department of the SABC to ask about the car registration number, which was strangely similar to the cars that we lease. But I couldn't draw any help, so I decided to litigate, and I went to the South Gauteng High Court.
Around about when did this incident happen? 2017, 2018?
It was, if I may direct the witness, Chair, page 8, 29 January 2018.
Okay.
Thank you.
It
You
was a
decided
Monday.
to litigate.
Yes, I decided to litigate to ascertain the identity of the gentleman who gave chase. I stood alone in court, even though I was on duty with the SABC satellite, the live view. I was with SABC personnel, and I met my harm in the line of duty. And the court issued an order compelling the company Schindler to reveal the identity of the driver. We were being chased by one white gentleman whose name is Jan Ungara, the man who often fixes the lift next to my office on the second floor of the SABC TV block.
Somebody you knew?
I don't know him, sir. I didn't know him.
Oh, you didn't
but
know
he
him
fixes
before?
the lifts at the SABC.
Yes, okay.
So I went back to Ndate Matebula, who runs the security department of the SABC. And I gave him the name Jan Ungara. And he printed out several pages of the number of times Jan Ungara had entered the SABC building to fix the lifts. And he has a pers number, which is an SABC employee number.
But he is also employed by the lift company? Or
By Schindler, the supplier of
Yes.
the SABC.
So,
To my mind, it's a discussion between the SABC and Schindler.
yes.
The SABC has the power in the relationship because it's a service provider to a corporation.
Yes, yes.
It's a CEO to CEO discussion. You ask why the employee is chasing journalists. And I wrote to the board members, including my sister-in-law, Phoebe Borkete-Gobul, and I asked for a full report. I never received a report on this incident. But
this is
Vanessa?
2018, isn't it? This is 2018. It's no longer 2014, 2016. Or was it an old board?
this is the interim board.
This is the interim board, yeah.
Yes, the interim board was attempting to clean up, but the issues were unresolved. The pitched battles between enforcers, ourselves, and the scrapes over the editorial direction had unabated. And we realized what Mr. Nyana Mulete told us on the first meeting back in Debele's office after our reinstatement. He said nothing has changed here.
By the way, you were reinstated within weeks after you were dismissed, isn't it?
Yes, Chief.
Within weeks. So you didn't stay out of SABC for a long time.
I think it was a little less than a month.
Little less than a month. But once you got the name of the person who had been chasing you, endangering your lives like that, apart from going to the board, did you go to the CEO, the COO, or people like that, apart from Matebula?
Yes, the acting CEO, GCEO at the time was Nomsa Philiso. She said that she would engage a law firm, Adonisi, to look into this. This matter was so incompetently handled by Madonisi and whoever was responsible that I discovered by befriending the other black Schindler guys that Jan Ungara had been invited back into the building months after this.
But before a law firm could be asked to do anything, I would have thought that the first thing that would happen would be for the CEO or acting CEO to say, well, if this guy is supposed to be employed by the SABC, who is in charge of that person? How did that happen? I want that person to come here. I want to find out and do an internal investigation to establish exactly what's happening before you even go outside. That didn't happen, or you don't know?
Not much of that happened, Deputy Chief Justice. I only saw a letter from Nomsa Philiso to Bruce Phipson saying that the gentleman's entry to the building should be halted. And
should be halted?
Yes, temporarily, clearly, because he later found himself back merrily in the building.
And was any issue taken up with Schindler, with the lift company?
I saw a letter from Nomsa Philiso indicating that the CEO of Schindler was out of town and that Schindler believes that it was a case of road rage because we had skipped a red robot. There was no red robot where we were.
But did the SABC ever call upon this guy to answer, to say, you know, this is what we have, has been found out? What was going on? What do you have to say? As far as you know, there's nothing like that.
I would have expected that they would have put our assailant and us in the same
at some
room
stage.
And said, talk it out, what happened.
Yes.
But none of that happened. And the odd thing was the SABC inviting him back to report on duty. The other thing that was very odd was that Futa Krige investigated this man, found that he has a criminal record. And he's entering a criminal record. I mean, he's entering a national key point with a criminal record. And the second part is that the criminal record was for similar behavior. And on his personal websites, we found scary swastikas, armed people, bullets, that kind of visual and image, which I then gave to the Commission of Inquiry into State Capture.
Thank you.
So as far as you know, is this person back at SABC even as we speak? Or the last time you knew he was back?
He was back, and in a meeting with our new CEO, Madoda Mxakwe, Weber Wenzel, Daniel Siv, he was working at Weber Wenzel at the time, and we confronted Nomsa Philiso about this gentleman and the incident. And she said two things that alarmed me. She said that the cop who was off duty was asked by her to go and take a look into me across the road at the TV block. She also said that she was unaware that this gentleman is back in the building. And then the CEO asked her to make sure that this doesn't occur again. That's the CEO, Madoda Mxakwe.
Said she must make sure what?
That this matter is resolved, that this man mustn't come back here.
Yes. What position is she in now? She was acting CEO at the time of the incident.
She has since left the corporation.
She has since left the corporation.
Yes, sir.
And she left before there was finality on the matter.
She left before there was finality on a whole slew of matters.
This is quite concerning because it happened in the context of what appears to have been continued acts of threats and intimidation that may have been connected with the stance you and others took against the protest policy and against instructions that were being given to the newsroom that were objectionable.
Chief Justice, may I say that the SABC 8 became the most unlucky people, the most coincidence-prone people on earth, and the most traumatized.
I mean, when I read your statement and all the things that you have talked about here, and also what I think some of the other witnesses from the SABC 8 who have given evidence talked about, it just seemed a very strange phenomenon that was happening around the SABC 8. I mean, the manner in which, I mean, Ms. Venter's house was broken into in circumstances which appeared to have been intimidation, threats, and then Mr. Krieg's helper or somebody who was held at gunpoint around about that time, and then you were receiving, as the SABC 8, threatening messages, all of which seem to be connected with this stance you were taking simply about certain directives and the protest policy. And then you were chased like this. I mean, when you read how you describe in your statement, in your affidavit, how you were chased, you were lucky that no accident occurred as a result of trying to run away from the person who was chasing you. And then there is this incident where you're talking about where the off-duty policemen, where they just wanted you to go to the police station and all of that. And all of these things all seem to be left hanging.
All of them are left hanging, Deputy Chief Justice.
I mean, we certainly don't see ourselves as the Commission as people who can solve everything, but we certainly should do what we can in regard to particularly matters that seem quite connected with what we are investigating, because it may well be that certain people were prepared to go to very great lengths to try and make sure that people who stood against certain things at SABC were dealt with. And if one is going to look at what ultimately might need to be recommended to try and prevent similar things happening in the future. One needs to understand the full extent of what was happening. So I think that the investigators must follow these things up, and the legal team can guide them.
Yes, sir.
But I think they must be followed up, and I would like to be updated in a few weeks' time as to how far they've gone to try and establish, get full clarity about some of these things and some of these characters that were involved. The police officer who was involved in this thing, and the handling of the matter relating to somebody that is known by the SABC, who chased SAB staffers and almost got them killed, because anything could have happened with them driving, through red robots and whatever. But
Yes.
it just seems like the matter was not being given the seriousness and urgency that it deserved. So I would like, if you can take that further and get the investigators to look into all of those things. I would like to be updated before the end of September as to how far everything is.
Thank you, Chair. We'll do that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Then, Chair, as I've indicated, because of the pasting of the annexures, then the paragraphs, now we are at paragraph 175.
Yes.
So it appears as if we've jumped, but it's actually
Yes.
the sequence.
Okay, no, that's fine.
Yes, thank you. Then you make mention of your colleague, Ms. Sophie Mkwena, and could you
Yes.
just tell the Chair what happened between you and her?
We were coming back from Krivani's office. We had a dispute about a story involving SAP, one of the IT companies from Germany, and how it handled the issue of contracts with ESCOM and the Guptas. So I felt that in this case, and I was, I was in two minds even as I was arguing. But I felt that journalistically we didn't have credible sources on the story. But that's a separate matter, because when we came back, I followed her to her office where we were still talking about SAP, and then she told me that I am defending SAP because I was an apartheid spy. And I said, you must be crazy. You must take some meds. I've never been an apartheid spy. I was an activist from the age of 12. And that is a discussion that just went south. A few weeks later, Mama Mandela passed away. I was aware that Sophie was close to Mama Mandela and the family. And on the sideline, and Mahlatsi Gallants, the head of SANEF, told me after the spy allegations now were blowing hot and furious, and I was being insulted all over social media, that Sophie had taken her to see Mama Mandela, and Mama Mandela, I think prompted by Sophie, this is what I read into what Mahlatsi Gallants told me, then told her that I'm supposed to be a spy. And a journalist called Deshni recorded Mama Mandela doing this on the sidelines of the launch of a documentary. Then in a 2:15 meeting, Sophie then says that we must then prepare for a story about journalists who were Stratcom. And I'm still naively unaware that the issue is me here. Then I went to Village Walk, to a gathering about ethics. And when I opened my phone, I discovered that the whole town is talking about me being a spy. And I got a call from Sam Kokeli, the chairperson of the Media Freedom Committee of SANEF, and a colleague. And he said, Tanega, what are we as SANEF to do about these spy allegations? What can you say? I've never been a spy. I then went home and I called the church. My father was one of the leaders of the South African Council of Churches and president of the Methodist Church. So I reached out to the Archbishop Thabo Makgoba, who was at university with me at Wits. And he was traveling, he was in Rome. I said to him, Thabo, I'm hurting in places I didn't even know exist. I just need some kind of spiritual counsel. What is this? And then he said, I'll attend to you once I return from Rome. The next call I made was to Ngugaitobi. And I said to Advocate Tembeka Ngugaitobi that what they're doing to me, the EFF, is really unwarranted, and I take strong exception to it. I phoned Dali Mpofu, who was also a classmate of mine, comrade of mine. We were arrested together at Wits University. We spent our better part of our final year in solitary confinement. We arrived at John Forster together. I phoned him and I said, Dali, you're chairman of this thing. You need to do something. And he said, I said, Dali, since when am I a spy? He said, oh man, groups, I know you're not a spy. And I couldn't understand why this thing is a runaway fire. Why is it not being doused by reason and sanity? Needless to say, it was 5 days of this. My brother, the economist Duma Gqubule, didn't go to work. He was so enraged and so aggrieved that he decided to go online and fight every single troll. I decided to apply to every single intelligence agency in the country to have my apartheid records declassified. Once they were declassified, I discovered that I wasn't a spy, which I knew, and that I was spied on heavily, especially in my first job as a reporter at the Weekly Mail, calls to Lusaka, to Tom Sabina, and even operations of Stratcom that we didn't know about, like Operation Aristotle, and all of those were used to spy on me and my comrades in those days before I was a journalist. So it's only through this that we were able to put it to bed. I also had a meeting with Nomavenda Mtiane, who was also unfortunately fingered. And she reminded me that on the last day of the 7 days of the testimony of Mam Mandela at the Truth Commission, Advocate Dumisa Ntsebeza put it to her that he had been given by Stratcom the list of journalists who were spies, and that the 3 names, Thandeka Gqubule, Anton Harber, and Nomavenda Matiane, were not spies, or were not on the list. So even as Mahlatsi is being invited to listen to my spying, everybody knew that there was no such in terms of what was led as evidence before the Truth Commission. The matter is still before the courts. It will be heard. It's a defamation matter. Advocate Wim Trent-Grove is said to argue this matter before the courts in October.
Okay.
But we see it as part of a slew of smears that were meant to devastate us and destroy us. Some days, Chief Justice, I'm just happy when I wake up alive, that I've woken up alive.
Thank you. Thank you. And so, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, we've gone past 5 o'clock. Sorry, I'm lost track of time.
Yes, but I
yes.
think it's better that we finish.
That we finish here. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Shall we then deal with the issue where the Sunday World, according to paragraph 177, where they published an article about you and the SIU? Could you talk to that?
Yes, I got a call from a journalist by the name of Obrim Tombeni. He's from the Sunday World.
I'm sorry, let me interrupt you.
Yes.
Mr. Pretorius, I know we need to meet, but it may be that if your other commitments dictate that maybe we should rather meet tomorrow morning, that would be fine.
I don't have a microphone, DCJ,
but I can hear you.
I'm in your hands.
Okay.
How long the evidence will go.
Yeah, so we will continue, but if while we are continuing you think let's rather meet tomorrow, feel free to leave and then you can talk to me later in the evening.
Will do.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes.
Yes, I interrupted you. I think you might
Thank
have
you.
to repeat the
Oh, I
question.
beg your pardon.
I received a call,
Sorry.
ma'am, from Obrim Tombeni. He's a journalist with the Sunday World. He was in possession of my entire employment file at the SABC. He was also in possession of the scores, interview scores of the panel that met to look at the performance in the interview of various candidates for the post.
Candidates for a position that you had applied for,
Yes, Deputy Chief
the
Justice.
current position.
The current position.
Yes.
Okay.
And the headline of the story that he subsequently wrote was SIU Guns for Gobol. Now, I was mystified. The SIU had not even interviewed me. And the SIU at the SABC had been quite brisk in interviewing people, looking for documents, and so on and so forth. They had not even sat down with me because, to my knowledge, there were no allegations of impropriety. I don't steal public money. I frown on people who do. And it's just not in my makeup. So I was just worried and mystified. So the SABC 8 responded in a letter after this publication to say that for about a year and a half, I had refused to return to the SABC after repeated approaches to come back to fill the position of economics editor, because they said that they had had 7 economics editors in a short space of time, I think 4 years, I'm not sure, and that all of them hadn't lasted, and they said that they had trouble filling the post. The trouble was to get the right combination of a tripod of skills, which is journalism, business, and economics, as well as broadcasting. So candidates tended to have
One or the
one
other,
or
two,
the other,
or,
but
yeah.
the combination of the three was proving a challenge to fill, and they were reluctant to fill it just anyhow. This is what I was told. So eventually I wrote to Jimmy and I said, I'll come. So I was concerned that they implied that the SIU could possibly be gunning for me. As it turns out, the SIU wasn't gunning for me at all. And this was just part of the smearing that stepped up on me after Suna died.
And this was when now in terms of, this was 2018?
This is all 2018. In 2018, Deputy Chief Justice, I became a spy. I was chased by a car, the SIU, and we were accused of taking Busasa money, which was also untrue.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Maybe now that you have dealt with the issue of your appointment in the interview, I should just bring to your attention that Mr. Hlaudi Mutweneng has submitted an affidavit to the Commission. At paragraph 128 of his affidavit, he says the Commission, amongst other things that he deals with about various employees, he says the Commission should also check the new appointees and check what kind of processes was followed, especially Tandega Gubule, whom I have been advised never attended any interviews. I know you do deal with the interview issue in your affidavit, in particular at page 26, that you could not attend when other people were interviewed, but you were subsequently interviewed.
Yes, I was subsequently interviewed
Yes.
by Sefako Nyaka, the head of current affairs, and by Nyana Mlete. And then I had an interview with Jimmy Matthews, and yeah.
Yes, thank you. Thank you,
But
Chair.
this was my third return to the SABC.
Yes.
So I was a known entity.
Yes.
So they knew what they were getting and what they were not getting.
Yes.
And headhunting is a legitimate process,
No,
and
true.
I guess Claudia would know that.
Yes, thank you. And then in
cared to.
paragraph 180, you deal with the death of Ms. Suna Fenter, and are you relating her death to the threats that you were all receiving, or are you just mentioning the matter?
Suna was unwell. Suna had a heart condition, but Suna was really, really going through the most. She was traumatized. At certain times, I would ask her because some of the stuff seemed just so bizarre, so unbelievable. And it's only after her death that we realized that Suna had suffered a lot. And she was shot in the face in West Dean. This is not far from where I was chased. She was, her house was burgled. She was constantly scared.
Yes.
But, Deputy Chief Justice, the place is replete with mysterious deaths.
It's very mysterious. So many things really are mysterious.
The death of the former head of legal is very bizarre. I mean, being shot at a time when the investigations are going on.
When you look at all of these things that were happening to the SABC age, and some of them happening to individuals who were in the SABC age, like yourself and Ms. Fenter, maybe more particularly your ones, which stretched into 2018 and so on. Are you able to say there may be other things other than the stand you took against the so-called protest policy and the directives that were issued in 2016, that you are able to link this with, to say, it maybe it's this and that, and maybe it's not, part of it is not connected with that stance you took, or are you only able to say if it's connected with anything, it looks like it can only be connected with this stand you took then?
I don't know,
You
Deputy
don't know.
Chief Justice.
Yes,
I don't know what's connected to it and what's not connected.
yes.
What I know is that in quick succession, devastating events occurred to us. And what is most concerning is the institutional response to the events. I'll give you an example. I asked Nomsa Philiso for the whistleblower policy of the SABC, because if you've got a whistleblower line, you must have a whistleblower policy. And we had hoped that we could deal with these things that are happening to us through the Protected Disclosures Act, which companies are obliged to follow and implement protections for internal whistleblowers. She responded by saying, there is no such at the SABC, and therefore you cannot rely on what doesn't exist. I remember I was driving with her in a car, and I said, but this is a no-brainer, it's the law, you have to have it. You can't say to me there is no such, and therefore your reliance on it is nil, or it's just something banal. So I, myself and Busi and the others sought to engage Weber Wenzel again to construct a potential or a draft or skeletal whistleblower policy to protect not just us, but anyone who in future hopes to stand up in workplaces, especially at the SABC. And Weber Wenzel did this, and about a few weeks after Weber Wenzel had drafted this skeletal whistleblower policy for us at our behest, well, the new gentleman, the new head of HR, Jonathan Tekiso, simply produced the whistleblower policy from the annals of the IT system within the SABC. And it was dated 2013, and he gave it to us. He said, the SABC has complied. Here's the whistleblower policy. What was that all about? So even as we were being told by authority that there is no such, there was a whistleblower policy. So we were being led up the garden path because the argument that we cannot rely on this was to be made.
Thank you.
And comparing the 2013 policy and the one that had been prepared by Weber Wenzel, you would have no issues with the 2013 one. It was fine as well.
The 2013 one is fine.
But it had almost been forgotten. Not many people knew about it.
Not many people knew about it. And not many people trusted the internal whistleblower mechanism. The perception was that if you made use of the internal whistleblower mechanism, you would be toast. And indeed, the history of whistleblowers in the SABC is that they get worked out of the system. So, like Krivani and the rest of the SABC 8, would that, particularly for SOEs, this country can develop measures to insulate and protect whistleblowers from harm and from experiencing the kinds of harm that we have experienced. And because they are the ones who would stand between us and future capture.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just ask, before I take you to the last paragraph, as you would, I'm sure you'd appreciate that we've reached the end of your statement. Could you just tell the chairperson, because this is a matter that Ms. Pillay had raised regarding the report that Mr. Joe Tlolo had prepared after having been commissioned to do so by the SABC. And you indicated in consultation that you had raised certain concerns about that report, and I would like you to raise those so that when Mr. Tlolo comes before the Commission tomorrow, he is aware of the matters that you are complaining about.
Yes, I did so in correspondence with the Chief Executive Madoda Mxakwe and Patiso Makopeni, our boss, as well as Ntate Joe Tlolo. I raised the issue that there are certain meetings in his report where Jimmy and Sibulelo are placed in those meetings where they really were not there.
That is Jimmy Matthews.
Yes.
And who?
And Sibulelo, Ms. Sibulelo Ditlakanyana. She wasn't in some of those meetings where she is placed.
Yes.
And Ntate Tlolo pointed out that in his view, these are minor issues and they don't affect the substance of his findings. He said, in fact, that these are typographical errors. But in our view, these errors have bearing because they imply either Jimmy's complicity or Sibulelo's complicity in matters in which they really were not involved. So we would want that part of the report corrected, but our board and our CEO is aware. Yes. And there are just some details about who was chairing what meeting that need to be corrected. The other concern that we have, beyond Krivani's concern, is that journalists must also be accountable in some way to the profession and to society, precisely because they play a key role in the democratic dispensation. And public service broadcast journalists in particular, because of the power that they wield. To speak every day to 28 million people is a huge privilege that must go with inordinate responsibility and the impunity that is condoned in the Joe Tlolo report is for me inadequate as a response to the type of moral, ethical crisis that journalism faced at the public broadcaster.
Okay. Thank you. We will raise those. They will be raised with him tomorrow morning. Thank you. Chair.
Well, I'm sorry, before we now that you raise the issue of journalists being accountable, that they've got accountability, you may or may not know that I have on a few occasions complained that journalists and media houses are very much in the habit of giving people about whom they have stories to write very inadequate time to respond, very short notice. We here in the Commission have been subjected to the same thing. And it looks like whatever appeal I make to the media to say, not just us, everybody, please just give people adequate time to put their side of the story. It looks like they say, we don't care about that. I mean, you get the impression that if journalists or editors think they've got a scoop or whatever, they don't care about somebody else's rights, even the kind of notice that they sometimes give. It's like they think everyone must be sitting and doing nothing and just waiting for them to write and say, please comment, my deadline is tomorrow. And they must drop everything and respond, because they give you that short notice so that in the article they'll be able to say, he did not come back to us. We invited him or her to comment. He didn't. But actually they give you an extremely short notice to do anything. And I don't understand why so many journalists appear to think it's right to do that. I suspect that it's their own concerns, maybe selfish concerns about being the one who comes out with the story first, and so on. But if the same things were to be done to them, they would find this unacceptable. So you wonder, where are these principles of fairness that we are all told are so entrenched in journalism? So I just mentioned that for what it's worth, because I have mentioned it on a few occasions in regard to other people, but in regard to the Commission as well. You know, I think sometime early this year or last year, the Commission was approached on Saturday afternoon by a Sunday newspaper to say, we must comment. They want to run a story the following day. I mean, what is that? Are we supposed to be sitting and doing nothing and just waiting in case one or other newspaper writes and says comment, so we must be available to comment within 24 hours? It's just unacceptable, but it's happening, and something must be found to correct it, because nobody would like that kind of thing to be done to them when they are on the other side of this thing. So I mention it for what it's worth. You are quite senior in the field, and you may or may not be able to say, well, this is the justification why people do this in the industry, or you might be able to raise it where, in whatever fora, to say, you know, there is real concern about this kind of thing. I mean, whatever the person has done, you know, process is different from the merits. Just make sure that the process is fair, you know. So, okay, all right, that was just my part.
I do take it seriously, Deputy Chief Justice. I sit on the National Council of SANEF.
Yes.
I attend the meetings.
Yes, thank you.
I do feel that there is a conversation about ethics more broadly that we have to have as an industry, especially at this time where revenues are seriously squeezed, and so scoop culture is encouraged.
Yes,
we need to draw some rules of some sort to introduce the principles of fairness, but it's a conversation that I do believe the industry has the intellectual faculty to engage with, as well as the will to look inwards and find a resolution.
Yes. It's quite important, because even for the profession of journalists. If I'm the subject of the story that a particular journalist writes, I must be able, whatever the story says about me, I must be able to say, this journalist was just doing her job, was just doing his job, and it's nothing personal. And I must be able to say, even though I disagree with this and that, but he or she is just doing her job and she has followed a fair process. But when I'm not given an adequate time, I'm likely to think this journalist doesn't care about my rights as an individual. He or she is just cared about being the first one to come up with that story. And I don't think that's a good perception that the profession should want to have. I would have thought that all self-respecting journalists would want a situation where you might write about somebody, but that person would be able to say, there's nothing personal. You are just doing your job, and you are not being sent by certain people to write certain things about me. You have not been captured. You're just doing your job. But when some of these things happen, I think it taints the image of the profession, because too many people think journalists are not fair. They are driving certain agendas against certain people, and it's not good that the public should have that kind of perception about such an important profession. Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Just lastly, what you've told the Commission for the 2.5 hours that you've been sitting there, you summarize it at page 27. And I think it's only fair that I allow you to just read that paragraph into the record, because it summarizes everything that you've told the chairperson. Yes, thank you.
During the past 10 years, a determined and corrupt group of people laid siege to the public broadcaster, to loot it of its resources and to lead it astray from its mandate. It was a systematic and vigorous project. It involved people inside the SABC and those outside of it. They wished to bend the narrative to suit their misappropriation agenda. They were indifferent to the human rights of citizens and employees of the SABC. They violated the public's right to know how they are governed. They violated the right of freedom of expression of their journalists. They violated labor rights and the rights to privacy that citizens and journalists have. The corporation buckled under the looting and the plunder. 4.1 billion was unaccounted for. The newsroom was a place of fear and pitched battles. They were vicious in their execution of their project, and in their wake, many people suffered: employees, families, children. Those considered to be opponents of their agenda were dealt with ruthlessly. This is the story of our recent history as a corporation. It is also the story of our country, of how a callous group of people laid siege to our lives and our livelihoods and helped themselves to our future.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Chairman. That is the evidence from the witness.
Yes.
May I say one last thing?
Yes.
Thank you.
Deputy Chief Justice, we want to thank you for hearing us. We have been yearning to have some moment of catharsis where we finally tell it all. We are worried about the SABC. The SABC, as you may have heard or sensed is a place that inflames a lot of passions, and it's a much-loved corporation by its workers. And its future is in danger. If we carry on with the current funding model, which is already disrupted by 3 factors, it was disrupted by the plunder and the stealing, and that's why some of us didn't want the retrenchments, because the staff have suffered so much, and they're not responsible for the plunder. And so others must plunder and they must suffer. Then the second part is that digital disruption has happened. People no longer watch TV through the normal device that you pay for. And TV license, the future of the TV license is a mechanism for extracting sufficient revenue, even though it's 15%, is in danger because of this digital disruption and the multiple use of devices. The use of multiple devices, excuse me. The third factor is that of broadcasters in the world, and the SABC 8 took the time to travel throughout Germany and to do research on other public broadcasters throughout the world. The 3% contribution of the public to the broadcaster is an anomaly globally. The public deserves a healthy, sound public broadcaster that is not subject to capture. Financial vulnerability, therefore, enables capture. It enables politicians to play games with the future of the SABC by withholding funds. And it makes the SABC addicted to bailouts because the mandate, the noble mandate, is unfunded. So this unfunded mandate is in need now of another bailout, and it's not forthcoming. And misery is about to begin. And misery in our country, especially when it comes to so powerful a mechanism of political, social, and economic communication, it is going to result in another opportunity for a looting spree. And at the SABC, the staff fear the day that our honorable current leaders walk out the door and leave us to the ravages of enemies that we've seen before.
The chairperson of the board of SABC, the current group CEO, Mr. Mxakwe, and now yourself, all of you have spoken about the situation in which the SABC finds itself. With no funding coming. And this sense I have got each time, each one of you, whenever each one of you spoke, is that the SABC is, or may well be, on the brink of a calamity, which could happen anytime. Is my understanding correct?
It is very correct,
yes.
Deputy Chief Justice.
Are you able to put your finger on whether there are any legitimate reasons that people within the SABC think may be behind this situation. Or what you may be thinking, well, why the SABC is allowed to be to stand on the brink of this calamity when that could be avoided, and from what I've heard, could have been avoided by funding being provided months ago.
All I can say is that the story of this corporation is one for the ages, because it is so powerful that the powerful seek to tame it. A weakened SABC is a controllable SABC.
And that is where everything revolves. And, well, Mr. Mtlagwe told me that the situation is so bad that he finds that every week he has to speak to his executive colleagues to ask them not to resign, which seemed to suggest to me his pleas could anytime become ineffective, and his colleagues might say, that's it. And I think the chairperson also, if I'm not mistaken, indicated the challenge that could happen if that were to happen. And of course, that we don't know where that could put the SABC other than what we know happens when a calamity happens. I said to Mr. Mtlagwe, if I recall correctly, I'm not sure what, if anything, I can do at this stage before I finish the work of the Commission. But I'm very concerned about what the situation of the SABC that has been described to me by successive witnesses here. And it's a situation where one wouldn't like a calamity to happen and to say, maybe I could have done something. But sometimes it's difficult to see what one can do. So, but it's something that is very concerning. I'm reflecting on it. Yeah. Thank you very much, Ms. Kubulempegi, for having come forward to share your experiences at the SABC over the period that you have dealt with, and to tell me about what happened to this SABC 8 during the period that you have described. I'm happy that you did come forward to give evidence. I'm happy that other people from the SABC came forward, including the other members of the SABC 8. You may have You may have to come back at some stage if we have reason to ask you to come back. And I will still hear other evidence and so on. But I believe that the judgment of the Labour Court vindicated your position in regard to what you stood for. Of course, you have described to me a lot of other things that would have happened after that happened to you. The issue of being chased by a car over a certain period. I think your statements may be saying it was about 15 minutes or whatever of being chased. It must have been a difficult time when you didn't know whether you would crash against a car. But as I've indicated, I would like the investigators of the Commission to look into some of the issues that you have raised. It is very important that we have people who will stand up when things happen which they believe are wrong. And because if nobody stands up, then the wrong things don't get stopped. I'm really happy that you and the other witnesses came and gave evidence. Thank you very much. And the other issues that I said should be investigated will be investigated. And I will ask the investigators and the legal team to keep you informed. I have no doubt that you will give whatever cooperation to them. And then you would have heard what I said earlier to the other witnesses, that I'm very keen for people in the media to reflect on what input contribution they can make to the Commission with regard to what recommendations I should consider making in regard to what happened at the SABC, what happens with political interference with editorial policies, editorial independence. So people like you should work on that so that at the right time the Commission can be enriched by the submissions that the media can make. So thank you very much for coming once again, and you are excused. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That is all for today.
That is all for today.
Yes.
And how many have we got tomorrow?
Tomorrow we've lined up only 2 witnesses, Mr. Chairman, and that's one of the things I would like to talk to you about. They are not going to be long witnesses at all, and that might mean that we might have to finish early.
Or what's your estimate of when we might finish?
I think by lunchtime. We should even...
By lunchtime?
Or maybe even slightly before lunchtime.
Yeah.
Yes, sure.
Okay. No, that's fine. But we'll start at 10 o'clock then.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Thank you.
We'll adjourn at this stage, and then tomorrow we'll start at 10 o'clock. We adjourn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All rise.